My boyfriend of 7 years cheated on me, despite the fact that we recently celebrated our anniversary by going to Italy literally a month ago. But now, after finding out everything that's going on, I've decided to put my foot down and leave this man completely, as I've gone through some extensive steps to escape this weirdo and move on with my life. Here's how I did it. I'm a 27-year-old female, and I just found out that my 29-year-old boyfriend of 7 years cheated on me. My boyfriend went to his home state to see his family for the weekend, and he's been going quite often this year, about once a month, saying it's because his grandparents are old and they miss him. And seriously, I thought nothing of it until this morning. I got a screenshot from a mutual friend of ours of my boyfriend's location on Snapchat. He was at his parents' house, but a girl's Bitmoji was there as well. And this wasn't his sister or mom, and his parents, who weirdly also have Snapchat, were not home either. He didn't tell me he was going to be with anyone else today, and I tried calling him, but he just did not pick up. In fact, I looked on Snapchat and his location was turned off. The mutual friend says my boyfriend has told everyone at home that we broke up about 4 months ago. He said my boyfriend was making him stay quiet about it because he was trying to find the right time to tell me. As far as his parents know, he's moving home once our lease is up. Now, the reason our mutual friend told me was because he walked in on our boyfriend and the girl hooking up with each other this morning. I texted an old friend who lives in my hometown, and she immediately asked why my boyfriend was on Tinder. We caught up and she sent proof of his photos being on Tinder and his bio, and it really hurt to see that the photos he was using were ones that I took of him. He had even covered my face in a photo that we took together and said, "This could be you." Now, I had no idea his family thought we were broken up and that he was looking for other people to date. We even went to Italy a month ago to celebrate our 7-year anniversary. I'm honestly so confused and I just don't know what to do. I look around and everything in our apartment seems like a lie. My soon-to-be ex-boyfriend texted me just now and he's on his flight back home. He'll be back in about 5 hours, and obviously he can find his own way to the apartment from the airport. I'm shocked and numb, but my best friend is with me and they're helping me pack up all my clothing. I'm leaving and I'm not leaving a trace of myself behind. Our dog is also coming with me, and for now I'll be staying at my best friend's place. My soon-to-be ex and I already have separate bank accounts, and our joint bank account does not have much in it right now. I make more than he does, so he can keep it as far as I'm concerned. I also can't go to the leasing office because it's closed on Sundays, but I sent an email asking for early termination on the lease. We are registered as domestic partners, so I've completed the termination form, and I will drive up to the LA County office tomorrow. Also, he's on my health insurance, but I've sent the email to Human Resources to kick him off as soon as possible. We have several large photo albums together, and I'm not sure what to do with those now. Keeping them would be too difficult, but I don't want him to have the satisfaction of having our photos. I mean, it's clear that he uses our memories in a horrible way. So seriously, is there anything that I'm missing here? I can't seem to think of anything at all, and my thoughts are just so jumbled. Nothing makes sense, but I know for a fact I can't stay. What should I do? Before we go any further, the original poster has an update of all the things they had to do just to get out of there. Here's what they had to say. First of all, I want to say thank you to everybody for the solid advice and basically walking me through this. I'm also compiling everything I did in the first section, so if others need a way to cut contact with a person, they can reference this and know what to do. And trust me, there was a lot of things I needed to do. To start things out, I logged myself out of our Apple TV and Xbox. I also canceled the Wi-Fi that I paid for and returned the modem to the carrier. On top of that, I took my payment information for utilities off of our account. I also packed up all of my sauces, my spices, and my cooking oils, and I took note to only leave dried rosemary behind. And the reason I did that is because I know he hates that crap. I then printed out and framed the screenshot of his Tinder profile, and I left it right on the kitchen table. I even closed a piece of dog poop into the frame as well. So with that in mind, I'll keep the photo albums and he can have this. I then took a video of the entire apartment after packing up all my things. I left my keys in the mailbox to the leasing office and emailed the leasing office of my departure with the videos of what the apartment looked like prior to locking up. I then basically updated my address for pretty much everything, from the postal service to the vet, as well as the hospital, school, my work, and my dog's chip. I then talked to Human Resources, and I'm in the process of getting him off of my health insurance, just like I talked about earlier in my other part. I'm also changing the benefactor of my life insurance over to my parents, as well as changing my emergency contact. Now, I'm also going to the bank to take myself off the joint bank account. Fortunately, I'm not worried about my credit, as all of our finances have stayed separate, but I'm grateful to those who told me to freeze my credit. I then logged out of all devices for all streaming services, as well as my work, personal, and school email. Once I did all that, I blocked him on all social media, as well as any chat rooms and his phone number, while also making an appointment with a doctor just to make sure I don't have any diseases, if you know what I mean. And with all that said and done, I'm on my way to an appointment with a county office just to terminate our domestic partnership. So as you can imagine, it's been an incredibly busy 18 hours, but I've had a lot of help from my friends, and I haven't really been able to sleep either. Now, in terms of what happened since he arrived, here's basically what went down. I already blocked him before he landed, and I received many text messages and calls from his parents and sister that I just did not see. Then, when I noticed his sister calling, I picked up the phone. At first, the call was hostile. She accused me of being some crazy ex-girlfriend that could not let her brother go, which is funny since I just packed up and left the house. She brought up that it had been 4 months and that I needed to move on, but I told her that the ex never approached me about breaking up, and that 1 month ago, we celebrated our 7th anniversary and started to plan our wedding. Like I had no indication he even wanted to break up. We then reset a bit and she allowed me to tell her side of the story. I told her he was somewhat distant this year, but he had blamed it on their grandparents being old and wanting to spend more time with them before they die. But it turns out their grandparents have been dead for 2 years. Now, I never met them because my ex claimed that they were super awful towards certain types of Asians, all because his grandfather was in the Vietnam War. And yes, for reference, I am Southeast Asian. But it turns out you can't be that way if you're dead. We ended the call on a positive note, with his sister saying that that is a lot to take in. She then said that she felt bad as the girl he was cheating on me with was one of her friends. She had introduced them to each other sometime last year when my ex was apparently unhappy with our relationship. They hit it off and he was supposed to break it off with me, but I guess he just never had the guts to do so. She was also confused as to why he was on Tinder, as he was in a relationship with her friend. And yes, I sent her all the Tinder receipts after hanging up. Later in the night, I received an email from my ex. To sum it up, yes, he asked me to come to the apartment to talk it out, and no, he did not apologize for anything. And yeah, he even ended the email by saying, "I love you." As far as I know, he doesn't know where I am, and I also don't believe he knows where my friend lives, as she just moved and he hasn't really been here yet. He also doesn't seem like that type of person, but I guess I didn't really know him after all. We will keep the locks ready and bats near the door if we really need it. But I will say it's been so helpful just writing out everything that's happened so far. But all of your advice, support, and guidance in this situation has made me feel empowered enough to leave. At times, I just wanted to stop packing and hope that when he came back home, everything would go back to normal and the text would just be a distant memory. But your words of encouragement have really helped me follow through and leave, because at the end of the day, nothing good would have come if I decided to stay. Man, good for the original poster for getting out of there. Holy crap, I can't imagine going through something like this. Like, imagine that. You just went to Italy of all places for your 7-year anniversary. Meanwhile, this guy's already cheating on you once and is now possibly cheating on his new girlfriend by being on Tinder. Like, your boyfriend's a piece of crap, dude. And he set it up in a way where it's like, oh yeah, no one from his family's ever gonna like contact you, because he's convinced them that, yeah, you guys broke up 4 months ago and you're just obsessed with him. So truly, I'm so glad you got out of there. I'm glad you did everything that you needed. And just like the original poster said, that's a really good list of things you need to change. But hopefully everything works out and you have a better life, because your boyfriend is a piece of garbage and you could do much better than that. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. An entitled mom trying to get to the airport demands that I give up my disabled seat so that her family could all sit together. But thankfully, karma was on my side as I watched this entitled mom and her family miss the part of the train that they had to switch over on, which in effect made them miss their flight altogether. And I couldn't be more satisfied because this lady absolutely deserved it. Here's what happened. Okay, so something interesting happened to me today that I absolutely wanted to share. So the local train is set up in a certain way where it goes as a full train for 90% of the line, then it splits into 2 trains in the end, one going to the suburbs and one going to the airport. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so far so good. Because today, as usual, I was going on the part that goes to the suburbs. Currently, there is a holiday season here, so there are lots of people with suitcases around that want to go to the airport. And almost every single day, I see people who enter the rear part of the train towards the suburbs by mistake. Now, I usually help those people out and tell them when they can best change to get into the front part of the train to the airport. You can easily spot them with a big suitcase looking a bit out of place. But today was very different. I have a bit of a limp on my right leg, so I'm pretty slow, and usually I sit in the disabled seat, which makes things easier for me to get in and out of the train. And it's right about here that the entitled family of this story steps in. A big family with all these suitcases entered the train, namely a mom, a dad, 2 kids, and grandma, and they started arguing about if the train goes to the airport or not, with mom being very sure it goes to the airport, and that they all, on the other hand, are just wrong. They then started looking for seats, and I could see that they're coming towards me, and at this point, I'm pretty much sitting alone. Well, this entitled mom comes up to me and is now telling me that I should get up and make room for them, telling me that I was sitting in a family part and that I should not be sitting there. To be honest, I would have made room for them anyways, but I only smiled at them and got up without another word. But this entitled mom was clearly not done yet, telling me off for how rude I am and that I should look out for people who actually need those spots. Dad eventually pulled her to the side and just pointed out my limp and that I'm probably disabled, but she only looked at me like sour grapes, just giving off this very much insincere apology. I was staying quiet towards them, moving a couple seats over, and just watching somewhat with malicious delight as they realized they were in the wrong part of the train and missed the last station to switch over, which for me, when I consider how this lady acted, in my opinion is the kind of karma that she absolutely deserves. Dude, I love this because holy crap, it is so rare that you ever get to see karma work its magic. And the best part about it is that the original poster is clearly a local. They know exactly where to go and they help people out all the time. So this is just a good lesson for pretty much anybody. If you're just nice and treat people with kindness, you very well might just get the help that you need instead of getting nothing and then you end up going to the wrong place, which in my opinion is super hilarious and these people absolutely deserved it. Did I overreact after I walked out on my hairdresser, all because she didn't tell me 2 weeks ago that she couldn't style my hair the way that I wanted it? Because honestly, this has all been very upsetting and I just don't know if I made the wrong choice. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I'm 20 years old and I went to get my hair done today. I had messaged the woman who does my hair 2 weeks ago to see if she had any openings. I sent her a picture of what I wanted and she told me to send her a picture of the way my hair currently looks. I sent her a picture of that as well and she messaged me back saying that she had put me in for Saturday. Now, I want to clarify that she is the only person who has ever dyed my hair. The first time I dyed my hair about 8 months ago was with her, and I was very happy with what she did, and no one else has touched my hair but her ever since then. Now for context, the last couple of times I've done my hair, I got this little brown kind of coppery tone to my hair. This time I wanted to keep that coppery tone, but add some pink streaks because I wanted to do something fun. I'm not a hairdresser, I mean I don't know what is possible and what's not possible, and I expected to be told if something can or cannot be done. Well, today I walk into my appointment, and from the minute I walk in, she doesn't even remember scheduling my appointment, but then all of a sudden she does, and she asked me to wait while she gets her stuff ready. Then she asked me if I'm just getting a touch-up of what I've already done, but I said no, I sent you a picture of what I wanted. She then asked me to show it to her, and I do so, and she takes one look at the picture and says, "Oh yeah, I can't do that." Now I'm really surprised by this, because she had not said anything in the messages that I sent her, or even told me that it wasn't possible. So I tell her that I sent her a picture and a video of my hair, as well as the picture of what I wanted, and she didn't say anything about not being able to do it. Well, it was at this point she starts acting as if she had never even seen a picture of my hair before, so I decide to pull up my messages and I show her. She then says to me, "Well, it must have just slipped my mind to tell you," and then tells me to go look for something else that I want. At this point, I'm not even in the chair yet and I'm just standing there. I then go over to the waiting area and I'm on Pinterest trying to find something, but I'm also really upset. I was set on getting this color today. I didn't even look at anything else, like I have no clue what I want. I don't want to pick something in a rush and then not like it. I also feel that she, as a hairdresser, could have just made a suggestion to me about what I can do, because I didn't want to pick something that also wasn't possible. I look for a bit, but I simply can't decide. So I go up to her and I say that I'll just come back another day because I do not know what I want. She is taken aback, but she says to me, "Yeah, okay, we just can't do that. You need to pick another one." So I tell her I completely understand, and I'm not upset about not being able to do it, but I am upset because she asked for pictures of my hair and the hair that I wanted and scheduled my appointment, and then told me that I could not do it. I then told her that it would have been nice to have been told that she couldn't even do that over text messaging, because now I feel disappointed and rushed to pick something else. She then keeps talking about how she can't get my hair pink and that she can't give me what I want and just tells me to pick something else. I then tell her I get it and I have no problem with that. My real problem is the fact that she didn't tell me 2 weeks ago. She then says to me, "Well, what do you want me to do? I can still do your hair, but you're leaving." Now, it's important to know that I'm very sensitive and I was close to tears, so I just said thank you for your time and I walked out. But now, with it all being said and done, I'm wondering if I overreacted. I am very sensitive, so it was a huge deal to me. But should I have just sucked it up and picked something new like she said? I've also had nothing but good experiences before this, and I had no issue with not getting pink in my hair. I just hated feeling rushed and not being told beforehand. So am I overreacting? Because right now I'm very frustrated. Oh man, there's no way I would have stuck with that appointment. She sounded incredibly unprofessional and very rude too, by the way. It almost seems like she just wanted you on the schedule to fill up her appointments instead of providing a service that you clearly really wanted. Like, that's some terrible customer service, and I just don't think I would ever stick around. So no, you didn't overreact because your hairdresser sounds awful, and I think you would be much better off finding someone way better than this. My mom stormed off during my work event and left me and my kids stranded with no ride back, putting me in a situation where I was very uncomfortable, and even now after the fact, I'm still very upset about this. And at this point, I don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, so I'm gonna do my very best to share this objectively, but I am upset, so I just don't know if that's possible. I'm a 35-year-old female, and recently I bought a house with a granny flat to move my parents in when they retired. It's been about 6 months since they moved in full-time, and there have been growing pains, but mostly it's been going well. I have a job in childhood literacy, and I do public story times every other Saturday. Typically, what happens is that my dad will come help me set up, and then go back to my mom and my children and bring them over for story time. And for reference, I have 3 kids, ages 6, 4, and 2. My children are neurodivergent and get easily overstimulated, so they typically stay about 30 minutes, and then my parents take the children elsewhere while I finish up the day activities, and my dad comes back to help me pack up and bring me home. My mom helps me take photos during the event so I can advertise the free activities on social media. Now, today's story time was kind of important to me because there was collaboration potential with the author, but I did not communicate this since we weren't doing anything different than we typically do, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But I did ask my dad to get there a little bit early just so we could have time to get the kids a little more settled before I started the activities. Now, my mom is a late person. She's late for literally everything. We tease her about it because no matter how much time she has to get ready, she will still wait until the last minute. We also share locations because it's easier than having to check in all the time. So apparently my mom was running late and her and my dad got into some sort of argument about it, the details of which are unknown to me. When it was about 10 minutes before I was supposed to start, I checked their location and they were nearby, but not at all on a street that we typically take to get to the event. And it looked like they were parked on a random side street for a while. They finally arrived with a few minutes to spare, and as I was helping them out, one of my children said, "We're late," to which I responded by saying, "You're always late," in what I thought was a joking way. And trust me, this was a big mistake on my part. My mom looked irritated, and I tried to check in with her several times, but she got in the driver's seat and said very aggressively, "I need a minute and he can get lost," and then she drove away. I was hoping that she would just park and come back, but when it was clear that she wasn't planning to come to story time, I just went ahead and I did the activity without her. When she still wasn't there about 40 minutes later, I started to get worried and I checked her location. But when I checked, I saw that she had turned her location off. And when I called her, she didn't answer. I then called my sister to see if she could check in on her, but she also didn't answer the phone when she called. I then waited another 10 minutes or so and then sent her a text message that said, "Hey, I know you're mad, I get it, but I'm gonna need you to come back and pick up the kids. It's been nearly an hour and they're getting squirrely. Or at least let me know if you're not coming back so I can have my partner close down our brick and mortar bookstore and come pick them up." After about 5 more minutes, I called my husband and I explained the situation so that he could come get everybody since we didn't have a vehicle or car seats for the kids. But as I'm on the phone with him, I see her drive by. I walked over to her and she was cool as a cucumber. I asked if she was okay and got the kids in the car as they were starting to melt down at this point, all while my dad watched my booth. I then said something to her like, "Hey, I'm pretty upset and I know you're mad and I'm sorry, but this wasn't okay. We were worried and not sure how to get the kids home." Well, when I said that, she went off on me, asking why she can't have a little time when she asked for it. She even refused to admit that she had been gone as long as she had, which is really crazy because I even showed her the time. I then said to her, "Hey, it's fine, but it's not cool to do that at my work, and that we were stranded without a car. Plus, it was really inappropriate to leave with a car and the car seats and then not answer the phone." I then told her it would have been fine if she had just let me know, but I couldn't even check her location because she had turned it off. She then said that she didn't like feeling like she was being tracked all the time, and that she wasn't gone long enough for me to be upset. I was like, "Okay, but we had no clue when you were coming back." And I explained that I had asked my husband to come pick everybody up. Well, when I said that, she laughed at me, said that I was the one overreacting inappropriately, and that she can take as much time as she needs. She also didn't seem to believe me that I didn't have a car there. I then started to walk away, but at this point I was pretty upset. So I doubled back and I said that I wasn't going to let her gaslight me and make it seem like I was the one acting poorly. Now, I'm not proud of this next part, but I told her that leaving her grandkids like that with no transportation was a psychotic move to make, and that she needs therapy if she thinks that's appropriate. And again, I'm not proud of saying that. She then said that she could say the same about me. She then laughed at me again and said that I'm ridiculous, and sarcastically said that she's sorry that she traumatized me. But I was like, listen, you have to be able to admit that this wasn't okay, and it's not fair to turn it around on me. Plus, she can never admit when she's wrong. She then was like, "Oh, I can absolutely admit when I'm wrong." But I said to her, "Well, if you could, then you would say, 'Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have let you know, and no, that wasn't cool.'" Which she then sarcastically said right back to me. I then said to her, "Oh, cool, awesome." And then I walked away to tell my dad dad to head home with her, only to then see her drive away with my kids in the car, stranding my dad once again. I called him an Uber, and apparently when he got home, she was actually shocked that he took an Uber and asked why we didn't have a car there even though I had literally just told her. My dad eventually came back to get me and helped me pack up. When I got home, she was outside with the kids, and I came out and sat down and she just left and went back inside. My dad encouraged me to make up with her, so after about 10 minutes, I went in and she was in her bed. I asked her if she wanted to talk and she said no, and so I just left. Now, with all that in mind, I guess I'm just trying to figure out and understand how at fault I am here. Did I overreact in some way? Also, how can I even begin to repair this relationship? This is definitely the worst fight we've had in a very long time, and I'm genuinely freaked out and I just don't know what to do now. Okay, seriously, the way your mom is acting first and foremost is crazy. You mean to tell me that the lady who is always late got upset because someone said something about her being late, which then led to her like ghosting everybody for an hour, only to then act like this was not her fault? Are you kidding me right now? She stranded you and your kids at a place where you have no way of getting home. She's got the car seats, she's got the car. She was potentially about to upend pretty much everybody's life just to make sure you and especially your kids got home safely. So for her to come back and be like, what's wrong? I just needed some time to myself. And it's like, sure, if you're 14, this might be reasonable, but as someone who's in their 60s, you should know better ways of like managing your emotions. Like, holy crap, talk about being emotionally immature. Not to mention putting everybody in such a weird position. Like, she knew for a fact she held all the power and all the cards in that situation. So she absolutely could stall this out as long as possible and make your life miserable, which is the only reason she did this twice, by the way. Once the first time at the beginning of the event, and then the second time by leaving her husband behind, all while speeding off with your kids. Like, holy crap. If that's not inappropriate and very upsetting, I don't know what is. So for me, if I was in your shoes and I had these events on a regular basis, I would absolutely stop asking for her help. Like, honestly, this is some crazy behavior that you do not need. And by the way, it's not that hard to be on time to stuff. You just have to like schedule it properly and actually respect the people you're showing up for. Which from the sound of it, your mom does not respect you or anybody else in that household, and that absolutely needs to be corrected because she's the one living with you, not the other way around. My roommate's entitled father tries to blame me for his son failing out of university, claiming that because his son failed, I deserve to fail as well, as he tried to blame his son's failure on me. And I've never been more blown away by someone else's entitlement in my life. Here's what happened. So my freshman year, I was roommates with a guy who had fairly well-off parents. Let's call him John. John is not his real name. John was a child actor, and although he isn't one you would recognize immediately, he's played some side characters on big sitcoms and did some voice acting on some pretty popular kids shows. His parents hold him to a very high expectation and were very strict with him and his acting. So when he got into our university, which is considered a top 10 university globally, his parents held him to that same standard, which for a now liberated young adult with almost no maturity, he did the exact opposite of everything he should have done. He slept all day, partied all night, never studied, didn't go to class, etc. Yet when his parents would call him to check up on him, I would always be mentioned in the conversations. They needed to make sure that I was a good influence on their son, or so they would tell him. They would consistently ask if I was partying often, if illegal substances were involved, if I was bringing girls over late into the night, pretty much everything he was doing. They basically wanted to ensure that I wasn't the one doing it, just to keep their son safe. This goes on for months. Whenever his parents would call him during his midday nap, and I'd be in between classes, I'd always hear him defending me to his parents, and he'd go beet red whenever I'd walk in and hear what they were saying about me over the phone. So I'd leave and wait until his call ended, since I knew he already felt embarrassed enough. I didn't really think of what they were saying either. I just thought it was ironic and told John afterwards that he didn't need to apologize, since they weren't his thoughts but rather his parents. Around the end of the semester, John is told by his majors department that he would likely fail out of college if he did not ace the final exams in at least 2 of the 4 of his classes, and that he would have to retake the other 2 regardless of how he did. Moreover, he would also lose a scholarship that paid a substantial amount of his tuition. He had to call his dad to tell him the bad news while I was on the top bunk of the bed studying, and his father is shouting so loud that I can hear him through John's phone with my earbuds in. Eventually, the question is asked if I had anything to do with John's bad grades, and before John can say anything, his dad determines that John was covering for me because apparently I was a bad influence, and since I was was around him all the time, I must be the reason that he failed. He demanded to speak to me and wanted me to tell him everything I did to his son and how I corrupted him. And when John said that I didn't do anything wrong, it only made him angrier. And after telling me that I would pay, he eventually hung up the phone. And it's right about then that I realized this was way more serious than an angry father, and I seriously could not believe what this man did next. John's dad already knew my name and of course where I lived, but I didn't think he would do anything with that information until I got a call from the University Student Affairs Center telling me that John's father had requested access to my personal information through the student portal, which is basically a website with financial aid and enrollment information. And they basically wanted to change my passwords just in case my data was at risk. I tell John that his dad tried to access my info, and of course he called his dad to ask him what he was doing. This dad then said that because John was failing, he was pulling John out of college, and that he was coming in a few days to talk to me about my part in all of this. John then asked him again why he was looking into my info from the school, and that's when John's dad just straight up hung up on him. I couldn't focus on that BS at the time, since I had my own exams to prep for, but as he said he would, he showed up as this fairly skinny, balding guy, desperately trying to cover up his receding hairline by brushing as much stringy blonde hair to the front of his head as possible. I came down with the flu right before exams, so sadly I was forced to be in the room while John moved out, with his dad berating the both of us while I had my earbuds in. I felt like I was gonna puke the entire time. John looks like he's going to cry because he doesn't want to leave. I peek over my laptop to see his dad putting books and notes in the garbage and repeatedly asking John if he officially withdrew from the university until John just barked yes at him. John's dad then turns to me and says something along the lines of, "All right, now you." Again, I insist that I didn't do anything to his son except live with him, and the dad demanded that because I turned his kid from an accomplished actor to a college dropout, I should withdraw from the university as well. John is now yelling at his dad to leave me alone, and I'm telling him that there's no way I'm dropping out for his ego. He demands my laptop and portal login information, and I tell him that if he even so much as touches my laptop or me, I'm gonna call the police. Eventually, this escalates to a straight up shouting match among the three of us all in this room. That is until an RA knocks on the door, warning us that if we don't quiet down, he will get campus security to come in and settle the issue. The dad quiets himself again and calmly asks me to withdraw again because apparently it's only fair. I say no, because again, I didn't do anything. There's a silence in the room as he approaches the edge of my bunk. He's glaring at me. I'm putting my earbuds in because chemistry won't study itself, and he asks again, gripping the railing and almost hissing the question. I say to him, no, I didn't do anything. He finally decides that I'm not worth talking to anymore and says that he'll tell my parents everything I did and that they will make me leave college if he couldn't. And with that, he finally left with John. I got a text from my dad about a day later, and that he and my mom basically told him and his wife to get lost and to never contact me again in far more eloquent terms. I then got a barrage of emails and text messages, as well as Facebook posts from the parents, pretty much saying that I was at fault for ruining their son's life and that I don't deserve my seat at my university. So I ended up just blocking them as well. Every now and then my parents would get Facebook messages or emails, but they were promptly ignored as well. John angry reacted to my graduation pictures on Facebook a few months ago, so out of paranoia that they were spying on me through his account, I ended up having to unfortunately block him too. And hopefully John just understands that I don't want to deal with his crazy parents. That is honestly insane. Talk about seriously being completely out of line. This guy not only came in here and was demanding that you quit university, but he was basically blaming all of the things that his son did all on you. Can you imagine that? Here you are at school just trying to get your stuff done, and this crazy guy's like, oh, my son's failing, it's gotta be your fault. You're the reason he's not studying or going to class, despite the fact that you're literally sitting there trying to study and get stuff done. Like, is this guy seriously that much out of touch? And here's the thing, this is what happens when you have parents like this. These parents obsessed over their son who was clearly a talented actor and booked a lot of jobs, and he was also really good in school or something like that. And when he's finally able to get away from his helicopter parents, only then does he cut loose and not do a single thing with his life. And you know what? Everything that John is going through is his own fault. He didn't go to classes, he never studied, he was too busy going to parties and spending time with girls, as well as other sketchy stuff. Like seriously, John had it coming. So good for the original poster for standing their ground and refusing to cave to this weird guy. Because seriously, this guy was acting crazy, all the while trying to blame you for something that you absolutely didn't do. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled dad is demanding that I give him $3,000 just to fully fund his trip to Europe, even though he has this money in the first place and is only demanding this from me because he thinks that I owe him simply because he's my father. And at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So for a bit of background, my dad and I are currently on no contact together, and this is because he's been a controlling jerk my entire life, and there was an incident earlier this year that pushed things over the edge. I am still in contact with my mother, and I currently have a couple weeks off to spend time with my son, who is a few months old, before we start daycare. Usually, around lunchtime, I go to my parents' place so my mom can spend time with her grandson. My dad is at work during the time that I visit. During my most recent visit, my mom mentioned that my dad asked if I could pay $3,000 just to fund his trip to Europe. He's going to the UK, France, and maybe somewhere else for a month later this year. We have family spread out in those countries, so he will be visiting and staying with family and friends. My mom is not going, and it will actually be nice for her to have a vacation at home or something along those lines, since she won't have to be a maid and cook for a grown man for an entire month. I'm taking her to New York to stay with my aunt and cousins for a bit, where she can relax, and she will come back home with my cousins, who will stay for a couple of weeks just to hang out and visit where we live. My parents are lower middle class. They don't go on international trips on a normal basis, so this is a big treat. However, my parents live a very frugal lifestyle, so my dad has more than enough money to pay for this trip on his own. I know this because I literally have access to his bank account due to the fact that for years, I was basically managing their finances and paying bills online for him, even when I was a kid. He does not need the money from me, but he is simply asking because he is delusional and think that his children owe him because he did the bare parental minimum of providing food, clothing, and shelter for us. He did work hard, and I will always give him credit for that. However, he thinks we owe him and should always do as he says. To be clear though, my mom did not expect me to pay and was telling me more so I was informed on what was going on in the current circumstances. And it's all so very frustrating, and I seriously don't know what to do. That is honestly really disappointing that a parent would act that way. Like, first and foremost, your kids don't really owe you anything. Being a parent and raising your kids is the least that you're supposed to do, and that doesn't come with any kind of like repayment of any kind. You chose to bring kids into this world, so you now need to be the adult and raise them in some kind of way. And that doesn't include them being in some secret undefined debt towards you simply because you raised them. Like, no, that's unfair for the kids because they did not sign up for this level of pettiness. So personally, if he really wants to go to Europe, he can do it on his own dime. He clearly has the money for it, and I would not feel pressured or in any way cave to his weird demands, because that's exactly what this is. He's just being a weirdo right now. He's expecting you to finance his entire trip to Europe simply because you're his child. And when it comes down to it, that's honestly just really weird. And you do not deserve to be guilt-tripped in this way in the slightest. An entitled Karen demands that I move my seat so that she and her stupid friends can take my spot, despite the fact that I'm a season ticket holder for this specific seat. And I've never been more frustrated with anybody in my life. Here's what happened. To start things out, I am disabled and I use a walker. I have season tickets to a local minor league baseball team, and I sit in the AITA section at the ballpark. It's on the concourse, so I don't have to navigate steps to get to and from the restroom, as well as the concession stand or other things around me. I have the same seat for every game of the season, and it's at the end of the row. And there is a space for me to put my folded walker, since it does fold up pretty small, and room for me to get in and out even when the wheelchair spaces on the other side of my seat are occupied. Season ticket holders are given a card that the ticket taker scans on the way in. Okay, so one day last week, I was there sitting in my seat, drinking my beer, waiting for the game to start, when this large group suddenly comes along. A few developmentally disabled adults and a lot of non-disabled companions. The row I sit in has 10 seats. 4 of them are actually wheelchair spaces. The 4 wheelchair spaces are taken by those who need them. That leaves 5 regular seats, as the one I'm sitting in does not count here. So this able-bodied woman appeared to be the leader of this group and suddenly came over to me and told me to move because I apparently was not ticketed for the seat, stating that her group had the whole row and I needed to move. I told her that she was mistaken, and I showed her my season ticket card that has the section, row, and seat number printed right there on it. She still would not believe me and kept demanding that I get out of the way. I was about to go and fetch a staff member to resolve the issue, but thankfully one of them came over. I I have been a season ticket holder at this place since 2011 and have had this particular seat for 2 years now. I mean, almost everybody who works there knows me. So this was a battle this entitled Karen could not hope to win. So the staff member tells this entitled Karen to leave me alone, that I'm ticketed for that seat and I do not have to move. And the staff member also showed her where the group was actually ticketed for. While they did have my entire row except for my seat, only 5 of the disabled people could sit in the row. The other 4 were in wheelchairs. The rest of them had seats in the regular seating bowl, which was the same section, but right in front of the concourse row. The ADA row is for actual disabled people and a limited number of companions, not for all the non-disabled people in a large group. So the entitled Karen relents and finally leaves me alone, sort of. She's complaining loudly to her friends that I should have been more considerate and given up my seat for her, but I just straight up ignored her, hoping that this was it. But unfortunately, there was more. There is a pile of folding chairs in the alcove of the restrooms behind this row, and these people found them and decided to use them to make their own row behind me because they all wanted to sit together. Since both the wheelchair spaces to the left of me were occupied, the only access I had in and out was a space of about 2 feet wide. Fine, whatever, I can do that. Then another person with a folding chair came along and tried to block off that little space, so I would have no way to get out. I turned around and I told them no, and thankfully they backed off. The game was sold out, so there was no other seats for me to move to, just to try and get away from them. But honestly, I hope I never see them ever again. That is an awful situation. Imagine you're already disabled and you have to use a walker. Like, you're already limited in what you can and can't do, only to then have this entitled Karen basically block your exits. She not only demanded that you get out of the way and you move from your seat, but then she has the audacity to literally crowd you. Like, you're sitting there for a reason. It's not like you're sitting there because it's fun. I'm sure the original poster would rather not have to sit there and deal with this person, whether it's a season ticket spot or not. People who act like this and act like they just own everything around them and demand that everybody else around them bend to their will are honestly so annoying, and it's so frustrating that this entitled Karen tried to do this to the original poster. So good for you for standing your ground. You knew you were in the right. You didn't do anything wrong, and this entitled Karen had a horrible attitude. And for your sake and the rest of this season that you have a ticket for, I really hope you never have to deal with her ever again. My boyfriend refuses to brush his teeth, even though I've been bothering him about this for such a long time, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. So my boyfriend and I have been dating for about a year. About 6 months in, when he would spend the weekends at mine, I would realize he wouldn't bring a toothbrush. I eventually made him go buy one for my apartment, but soon realized that he wouldn't use it. I then started to really notice his teeth. They're often very yellow. It's absolutely disgusting and a huge turnoff. I find myself cringing when we kiss and not wanting to be intimate because of it. I'm not perfect, but I always brush my teeth twice a day, and I floss and I use mouthwash and then some. I started asking him to brush more often, telling him that this could lead to really expensive dental work down the road. And while he does it sometimes, if I'm not around, he forgets. I've told him he needs to go to the dentist, as I've noticed his gums are extremely inflamed, and he says he will do it, but it's been months, and he has yet to make an appointment. He gets visibly annoyed and embarrassed when I ask, but it's so gross to me, I can't just not ask him to brush his teeth. Sometimes he goes straight away, but other times he says he'll do it later, that he's fine and he has never had a cavity, which is crazy to me since his teeth are yellow and his gums are always inflamed. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like such a jerk for constantly nagging him, but I don't want to be intimate with someone whose teeth looks like they are colored with a yellow crayon. I've noticed he's more likely to brush them before larger events like a fancy date, but only after months of nagging him. And before anyone asks me how I've put up with it for this long, he definitely used to brush before our dates the first few weeks of us dating. I only started to notice when I smelled his breath one night and asked him when he last brushed, and it had been over 24 hours. And that's when I realized he never brushed at my apartment when he would spend the weekend with me. I've told him it's bad for his health. I've told him it's bad for my health. I've told him that I'm worried about him. I've bought him toothbrushes and toothpaste and floss. I just don't know what to do anymore. I'm so tired of nagging him about this. I'm honestly worried that he will start to resent me for nagging him, but I absolutely cannot deal with gross teeth. What should I do? Honestly, this is really disgusting. This guy never brushes his teeth, and his teeth are yellow as a result. I mean, I can only imagine how disgusting his breath must be. Like, seriously, it probably smells like roadkill. For me personally, when it comes to a significant other, they absolutely need to brush their teeth and have good hygiene. And that is not not an extreme thing to ask of them. Like, that is literally the most bare minimum thing you could ever expect. And also, there's really no good excuse for not having good hygiene. Like, you've literally given him everything he would possibly need for this. The only excuse left is the fact that he just doesn't want to do it. His mouth is probably riddled with cavities. He probably has all kinds of health issues going on with his mouth, and if this is how he's going to act towards brushing his teeth, then this is probably a deal breaker in my opinion. I know for a fact it would be a deal breaker for me. There's no way I'm gonna put up with that in the slightest. Like, you need to brush your teeth, otherwise this is not gonna work out. Like, that's just straight up gross. So hopefully your boyfriend is able to make some serious changes when it comes to his hygiene, because what you're describing right now is unacceptable, and it seriously is incredibly gross. Am I the jerk for not wanting to use my college fund to pay for my brother's medical treatment? Here's what happened. So my parents divorced when I was about 7 years old because my dad had admitted to having an affair. My mom and I moved out of our house and into our apartment, while my dad immediately moved his mistress into our house because she was pregnant with my twin brothers. My mom was devastated, but she quickly picked herself up for us. She went back to school, and as a result, she continued climbing up in her career. My mom adjusted better to going from a double income household to a single income and was able to contribute a substantial amount of money to my college fund. My dad, on the other hand, had a harder time, as he now has to support a family of 4, sometimes 5, on a single income, as his wife is a stay-at-home mom. My dad did not have much disposable income, and so he did not contribute as much to the fund. I'm going to finish school soon, and I have a good shot at getting into my first choices of college. Unfortunately, my brother was diagnosed with a kidney disease, which has progressed to where he needs to be on dialysis. My dad is drowning in medical debt, so my mom agreed he no longer needed to pay child support. The specialist had suggested a different treatment for my brother, as most other treatments didn't help or simply stopped working, and they are running out of options short of an entire transplant, which is simply not doable at this time. This treatment is not covered by insurance, and it costs a lot of money, and my dad can't take out a loan due to the debt. My dad and his wife sat me down when I was over and asked if I would be willing to let them borrow my college fund to pay off my brother's treatment. They offered to pay the money back, but I knew they wouldn't be able to. I really don't want to give them the money because I know if I don't get any scholarships, I wouldn't be able to go to college, and I want to go without getting into debt myself. My future would be at risk, and I know my dad wouldn't help if I needed it. In addition, the money technically belongs to my mom. I can't just give it away, and I know she would refuse to give them the money. My dad and his wife are furious at both my mom and I, and is trying to guilt trip me into giving them the money. I do feel terrible for my little brother. So am I the jerk for not wanting to use my college fund just to pay for my brother's treatment? What should I do? In my opinion, first off, the money is not yours. It is specifically your mother's. I also think you have it right when you're assuming that your dad will never pay you back. Like, he's already shown that he's an awful father, and now he's trying to pressure you into taking care of your kid, when in reality, that's his responsibility as the dad. Like, honestly, if they really wanted to pay off this debt, then they need to both get jobs, both the dad and his mistress. Like, she needs to step up to the plate and start doing her work, because realistically, your dad is just looking for the easy way out. He is simply trying to guilt trip you into giving him money. He's not going to pay you back, you know that for a fact. So if I was in your situation, I would probably feel the same way you did. It really is a shame of what your brother's going through, but you know who you're dealing with, and you know that your dad will never pay you back, and you'll be stuck with a lot of debt going to college. My entitled friend destroys my life by secretly stealing away my fiance, as well as ruining my trust in humanity. So I decided to get some revenge, and as a result, I decide to take this to the next level, and I ruin her reputation forever. Here's what happened. Once upon a time, I had an extremely close friend by the name of Mindy. Mindy is not her real name, and honestly, she was not just my friend, she was more like a sister. We met in grade school. She pursued my friendship, always tried to sit next to me, always wanting to talk, and over the years, we would spend lots of time at each other's houses. But by the time we were 19 years old, my house was a meeting place because she had extremely bad family trouble. My parents kind of informally took her in because they sympathized with her situation. I always tried to make her feel like she belonged and avoided luxury stuff if she could not afford it. Stuff like expensive shows and clothing that she might like but could not wear. Other times, I just gave her some of my stuff from my closet. She was nice, outspoken, and made me feel like I had the most loyal friend on the planet. The years go by, and I'm fresh out of college and I got a nice job. Mindy's life has significantly improved. She had her own place and a 9-to-5 that was a very reliable job. By then, we had a group of friends, all young professionals trying to make our way. I remember that time in my life as bittersweet. We would often reminisce of our college days, and because this happened in the 90s, there were no social networks or texting. If you wanted to get in touch, you had to exchange phone numbers or emails. Nowadays, it's fairly easier, so exchanging old stories glued us together as we wondered how things worked out for friends that we may never see again. Gatherings and get-togethers happened in my apartment. I loved that place. It was spacious, still half empty, because I was careful not to throw too much money into decoration. Around those days, Mindy began to look sickly and not quite herself. I was worried, and I loved her so much. She had always been there for me, especially when my fiance broke up with me for no reason. I guess we now call it ghosting. He was the first man that I truly fell in love with. I was never able to get him to express his love like I did, but I accepted him for who he was. He had some cold stages which left me wanting, but I thought I could manage. Basically, I was settling for being breadcrumbed. He was gorgeous, successful, and protective. So when he proposed, I was on cloud 9 and decided to ignore the negatives. I had saved a lot of money for our wedding. To be fair, he did the same in a separate banking account. Things came to an end when all of a sudden he broke up with me. He told me that he did not want to get married and did not love me, nor wanted any type of relationship. He let me keep the money from our joint account, plus some of the things at the apartment, namely his workbench, his clothing, pretty much everything now that I think about it. This had a bad effect on me. I felt like he despised me and wanted to cut ties no matter what the cost. Invitations had not been issued, so calling off the engagement was not such an ordeal. Mindy was there for me, listening to my pain, my rants, and my endless sobbing. I lost so much weight. I was embarrassed to be seen out on the street. She had a boyfriend by the name of George, that's not his real name, and he was awesome about letting me crash at their place whenever anguish and pain hit me hard. They both cut ties with my ex. I mean, I had made so many life-altering decisions just for him to leave me in the dark. Mindy and George sat me down and disclosed that my ex was seeing someone else. I remember the shock and the emotional pain. My heart was racing, and I ran to the bathroom because the bad news made me throw up. I never understood how my ex treated me like that. Those Christmases were so bad. I would sit in my living room staring at the wall. Mindy and George helped me set up a very 90s posh concept Christmas tree just to try and cheer me up. It had only white lights and a few golden ornaments and some natural pine. I was so depressed the tree stayed up until next spring. By summer, Mindy broke some devastating news. She was terminally ill. I was so angry. She didn't deserve any of this. Her diagnosis was grim. It was so bad that George proposed earlier than he had planned because he wanted to live in the moment. She had always dreamed of a huge wedding. It was her obsession. We would go into bridal shops and try on as many dresses as possible when we were just teenagers. The wedding of her dreams was now out of the question. Her family would not pitch in, as she had left home on very bad terms, and George could not pay for it on his own. George was now barely out of medical school and up to his neck in debt, so I decided to pay for her wedding. It would be a small event, but I would make sure the decorations and her dress were as dreamy as she had always wanted. I still had the money I had saved up for my wedding, and as financially risky or stupid as it may have sounded back then, I was sure those final days with Mindy would be worth gold when she was gone. Her illness made me realize there are worse things in this life other than being unceremoniously dumped by my ex. I threw myself into it. I was also happy and hopeful, as Mindy was able to go to her chemotherapy sessions by herself without becoming too sick. She also looked much better than other patients. Our group of friends also helped her a lot. There was not a day when someone would not bring her groceries or help pay for random utility bills, as she was now out of work. I had initially offered to help her set up a better health insurance plan, but she declined. Now, pay attention to this, as this will be important later on. So I decided not to intrude and give her the fairy tale wedding that she absolutely wanted. She had picked out a nice rental dress and a tiara. The florist was to accommodate her taste and create an indoor garden, and the venue itself would be my apartment. The baker had been retained for a 6-tier wedding cake. There would be 35 people in total, with tables, an aisle, and a musician to play some music. Now, back to the insurance issue. My first job was a junior sales executive for a health insurance company. There was a legal dispute against another person with insurance, and I was called in by the court to be a witness. As I was getting cleared to enter the building, I saw my ex. My stomach churned. I immediately thought courtroom wedding. By the time I reached for the elevator, he had already vanished. That messed up my day completely. I relived the lack of closure all over again. I could not let it go. I contacted a good friend who I knew was doing her law internship at the court district. She helped me by checking any legal records regarding my ex. No court wedding, but there was a fraud claim and he was the plaintiff. I didn't make much of it, but it was strange. He was very smart, and getting frauded out of his money sounded too uncharacteristic. I still wanted to help Mindy, and I tried to set her up with a good insurance plan. I knew it was difficult given that companies treat terminal patients as money-dumping risks. I pleaded with my old boss, and he searched her name, but she was not in the company database. I thought to myself maybe she was using a different insurance, but that was odd because she clearly told me what her insurance company was. I felt guilty because I was kind of snooping. Things were normal for a month until my friend at the courtroom broke some disgusting news. The defendant in my ex's lawsuit was my best friend Mindy. She asked me if I knew anything about it. I had no idea or clue. She then disclosed that the case had become popular gossip among courtroom clerks because my ex had fallen for a complicated Cupid scam. As it turns out, Mindy and my ex had an illicit love affair behind George's back and mine. It spanned for a full year, and she was not out of work. She had been fired for embezzlement and larceny, which is basically stealing from an employer. I did know that she kept moving apartments, but I thought she had been trying to save on rent, so she kept looking for cheaper and cheaper places. She moved around towns in the same city. First, she took my ex's money for some investment, and she used her former employer's credibility for it, and then she got him to help her with her medical bills, and scammed him out of close to $20,000. And that's when the ball dropped. Her illness was fake. I seriously couldn't believe it. I avoided her for a week. I hired a private investigator to help me get whatever I could, without much hope as their affair had ended. The PI managed to help me get some closure. His name was on her lease for a small studio apartment. Everyone in the building thought that they were a couple. It was their love nest, and it was 2 hours away. I never suspected anything, but apparently he had been lying to me about his actual working hours. He had also helped cover for her car payment at least 6 times in a year. She had my ex as a sugar daddy. She had seen me cry, puke, curl on my bed, and had broken the news that he had someone else, and it was her all along. My ex seemed salty over the fact that she had chosen to stick with George. It was simple math. My ex was very successful, but George, although not wealthy yet, had become a physician and was spoken for to a small practice with a potential partner. She upped and left and cheated him out of money along the way. Apparently, my ex figured out that she had been lying about her condition. The disgust, pain, and disappointment hit me fairly hard, but somehow I had so heavily invested in helping her that I had emptied myself of any potentially nerve-wracking reaction. I was completely numb. I went straight to the wedding vendors and canceled it before it was too late to get my money back. I defunded her wedding. No cake, no dress, and no veil. I sat down with George on a Friday afternoon and I offered him all the evidence and proof. He cried, but at the end admitted to feeling painfully relieved. Yes, he loved her, but he had felt pressure to get married. He confessed to many red flags. She always went to her medical appointments by herself and became irritated if he asked too many questions. She had shown him some test results that were incredibly well crafted, but not knowing what she had done, he thought the medical documents could be fake, and he confirmed that the sneaky way, having his nurse ex-roommate run her name in the computer at where she claimed to be her doctor's office. It was logical on her part as well back then. It was a fairly small town that only had one oncologist. We also suspected that she may have been having a new affair as she spent more and more weekends with her all-girls church camping group. She claimed it was her sanctuary and it helped her a lot, but it may have been a front. George and I accepted the fact that we had been cheated, taken advantage of, and emotionally destroyed by the same person. I personally felt a loss of innocence. Now I understood why she wanted to keep her wedding thing almost a secret. It may have been possible that making it public may have blown her cover one way or the other. So George and I decided to do what was right. I paid for a video tribute to my loyal friend and decided to send it to a local news station as the heartwarming story of love and healing. It featured her and George's apartment compound on purpose so that everyone wanting to serve her court papers could find her. I did not want to see her and I made up excuses, but George had a hard time feigning happiness once she had returned from her camping trip. It was an agonizing week. The news wasn't showing our positive note yet, and we were sick with the waiting, but it all blew up on Tuesday morning. The news channel enthusiastically showcased our story with a collage and lots of information about her and how she was about to get married and had almost already beaten cancer. Dozens of ill-spoken haters popped from out of nowhere. As it turns out, this had been her second illness story. I never knew someone so close to me could lead such a scummy double life. My ex went straight to the news channel and was interviewed. And oh man, it was pathetic. He poured his heart out about how crazy in love he had been and how she had only used him. I think by then he did not care if all of our friends and family found out about what he had done. George eventually confronted her with all the information. She denied it and then said it was a lapse of bad judgment. She moved out without too much drama. It took George over a decade to forgive himself for allowing someone to make him look so stupid as a person and as a physician. She left me some voicemails with a lot of excuses. I picked the phone up only once and I told her I had defunded and pulverized her wedding and that it was me who told George what was going on. I used a leveled voice to tell her to never call me again unless she wanted to find out how far I was willing to go to see her pay for her unlawful actions. I cried immediately after I hung up. It was so surreal. George and I slowly found normality, but it absolutely took some time. He dated a couple of girls here and there, but he was simply not ready. I myself basically shut down. She avoided jail, I don't know how, even when our mutual friends filed petty claims for all the money they invested buying her stuff while she carried on her false pretenses. Eventually, I used the wedding money to partner with George, and we opened a small clinic. It was the best decision we ever made. Over the years, George and I became best friends and we grew closer. Eventually, we got married some years ago, and we are now proud parents to a happy family. That is honestly a crazy story. Like, I don't even know where to begin with this. This friend is insane. She was playing everybody for a fool and using so many excuses just to try and scam a lot of people. Not only did she fake having cancer, but she was cheating on multiple people at multiple times. I mean, what kind of person would seriously do this? I mean, talk about the perfect storm of crazy. This goes to show you that sometimes people are not what they seem. On the outside, they might seem like a really good friend or someone who has your back, but in reality, they're the reason that your life fell apart. So good for the original poster for exposing this lady for the person she really is. Because honestly, she had it coming, and it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked down below in the description. My wife's friend thinks that she's entitled to free childcare despite all the toxic comments that she makes, and at this point, we're seriously unsure of what to do. My wife has a friend who we'll call Beth that is a single mom but gets a lot of help from her parents. Beth is not her real name. They often watch her kid and allow them to move in rent-free while she was getting settled after relocating. Stuff of that nature. She is pretty ungrateful about all the help that she gets. I've heard her complaining about her parents over things like them asking her to get milk on her way home from work and having to take care of her mom while she was sick with COVID. She also expects her parents to watch her kid without giving any notice. Beth also has a really negative opinion about all men, stemming from her terrible choices in partners, and is antagonistic and vocal about it. She loves to pick fights with the dads in the friend group about how men don't contribute domestically and how they're all oppressive scum. The dads in the friend group are very involved with their children, and they are good domestic partners that put in their fair share. I am my daughter's primary caretaker, and I do the vast majority of the domestic responsibilities around our home. My wife is also the breadwinner. My wife is very happy with my parenting and our division of labor in our home. I also make sure my wife gets leisure time free of our daughter whenever she wants it. This has done little to dissuade Beth from making disparaging comments. We all recently went to an event at a park. The event wasn't really my thing, but I went along to keep our daughter occupied. This way, my wife could relax and enjoy catching up with her friends without having to chase around our high-energy preschooler. Beth commented that it's nice my wife has a babysitter, as if me spending time with my daughter is somehow equated to me babysitting and not parenting. Beth and my wife have plans coming up to go to a crafting workshop. While discussing their plans for the day, Beth asked my wife if I would babysit her kid since I'd be staying home with my daughter. She did not offer to pay, so my wife shot her down. Beth then said that she probably has to cancel if I won't watch her kid. My wife said that's too bad and she'll just go alone. Beth has had several months to arrange childcare for their plans, but most likely told her parents yesterday and found out that they couldn't do it. Having enough money to hire a babysitter isn't the issue either. Beth is very successful in her career and very comfortable financially. If Beth had ever offered to watch our daughters or wasn't completely toxic towards me simply because I'm a man, I'd have no problem helping her out. Her entitled attitude about me babysitting for free is what gets me the most. I would never ask someone to babysit my kid without offering any kind of pay. This story is incredible to me because I'm blown away that these people are still communicating with Beth. She obviously has a distinct disdain towards men in general, which is obviously based off of her poor taste in men in the past. Like, first off, how is that anybody else's problem except for this lady's? Just because she can't pick a good partner doesn't mean that every man she runs into is a problem. If anything, she is the real problem in this friends group, and it blows my mind that anybody wants anything to do with her. And the worst part about it is Beth probably knows that she's being an entitled Karen. Like, she knows for a fact the way she's being perceived and the way she's acting towards those around her. She's not an idiot. She is well aware that her attitude absolutely sucks. So her actions and comments towards all the other men in this group, basically demoting them to just babysitters instead of fathers who are actively watching their children, all of that is honestly just a choice. Like, she's literally choosing to act this way. So in my opinion, I think it's time to find a better friend. Beth is a toxic individual, and she obviously has ill intent towards any guy in your group. And that, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable. I mean, flip the script for a second. Imagine if there was a guy in your group who was saying, wow, all these women are just deadbeats. Look at them not even helping out their family. Like, that to me would be insane, and that would be an instant boot for that guy. And honestly, in my opinion, if you want any kind of peace in your friend group, then it's time for Beth to either stop making these horribly toxic comments, or it's probably just time for her to leave. Am I the jerk for not letting my ex take our sons overseas on a trip, all because our daughter can't go? Here's what happened. So I'm a 38-year-old female, and I've been divorced from my ex-husband who's 40 years old for about 4 years. We have 3 kids together, a 17-year-old female, a 15-year-old male, and a 13-year-old male. I have primary custody of the kids because we live on opposite sides of the country. We alternate major holidays, and he gets them for 2 months during the summer. He works in the entertainment industry in California, while I live near family in Georgia. Last summer, our daughter decided that she didn't want to visit him during the summer. She didn't want to miss a summer with her friends, has a part-time job, and had other summertime activities here that she didn't want to miss. The 3 of us talked about it, and my ex was very understanding and supportive of our daughter's choice, even though he said he was saddened and disappointed by it. But he didn't push her on it, and we all came away from the conversation in agreement. This summer is the same thing. She'll be a senior this fall and wants to stay here with her friends again. We had another conversation, and although my ex expressed his feelings and hoped that she changed her mind, he didn't push it on her. Our sons have been with him for about 3 weeks now. Last week, he called me and asked me if I could send him the boys' passports because he wants to take them overseas. Apparently, a colleague of his invited him and the boys to take a trip on his yacht down the Pacific coast for a couple of weeks with a few stops in Mexico and Central America. This was a spontaneous thing. It wasn't planned. And to say I was a bit off-put by the whole thing would be an understatement. I don't feel 100% comfortable with it, but I understand it's kind of a once-in-a-lifetime experience for the kids. However, our daughter can't go, and that rubs me the wrong way. I asked my ex if there was any way our daughter could go too, and he said that unless she can make it there by the time they leave, they simply can't wait for her. Our daughter has multiple activities already planned for that time frame that we have either already paid for or that she is really looking forward to. When she heard about the trip idea that her brothers would go on without her, she was very disappointed. So I told my ex that unless there's a way for our daughter to go as well, I am not going to send him the passports or give him my permission as primary guardian to take them to another country. My ex gave me quite a bit of pushback on it because he and the boys are really looking forward to it, and he says it's a unique bonding experience that I'm depriving them of. When I told him how disappointed our daughter is about it, he said that if she's old enough to make mature decisions about how she spends her time and doesn't want to visit him, then she's old enough to realize that those decisions means that she's going to miss out on things that her brothers get to do while they are with him. The boys have been practically begging me to let them go, and I know that if I don't let them, they will blame me and their sister for it pretty much forever. So am I the jerk for denying them this overseas trip simply because my daughter can't go? What should I do? It really sounds like the original poster is trying to punish their ex. Your daughter can't go. They literally already made the choice to say, okay, I want to stay behind and work in Georgia, as well as spend the summer with my friends and doing other things. You can't do that and then get offended that your brothers are doing something cool, all because they chose to go spend time with their dad. So the fact that the original poster, aka the mom, is deciding suddenly that because her daughter can't go, her sons also can't go, in my opinion, is the definition of insanity. Why would you punish your 2 sons simply because your daughter can't make it there on time? She literally already has commitments. Why should your sons be punished for your daughter's decision? This is the dumbest thing on planet Earth. It honestly sounds like the original poster is just just trying to find a reason to punish their ex. And that is incredibly twisted and so disgusting. I mean, honestly, you're just ruining this just because you want to, not because there's any actual concern you might have. Like, the ex is literally right. The daughter's old enough to know that her decisions have consequences. And if she wants to work and stay in Georgia, well, congratulations, you're gonna miss out on this trip. And that's not him being unfair. That is literally just how life works. So yeah, you're the jerk for deciding not to let them go through with this trip. Using your daughter's disappointment for her stupid decision is honestly just a cop-out, and you honestly need to be better as a parent. An entitled Karen lets her dog take a dump on my patio repeatedly, and despite the fact that I tell them again and again to cut it out, she decides to try and gaslight me and claim that this is my problem and not hers. So I reported them to management at the apartment complex, and as a result, I ended up getting her evicted. And I've never been more satisfied to watch a Karen get put in her place. Here's what happened. So I first want to start off by saying that this happened at the last apartment complex I lived in. My significant other and I were renting a ground floor unit at a very nice apartment complex. Now, I wouldn't say that it was a luxury apartment or anything like that, but our ground floor unit had a little patio off the back that led out into a really nice courtyard, and that area hosted some hammocks, a walking path, an outdoor fireplace and seating area, etc. A lot of people walk their dogs out there or let their kids play out in the grass, including us. We have a 1-year-old Cane Corso. We got her when we had been living in the unit for about 2.5 months, and she was only 8 weeks old at the time. She's a really good dog, and we trained her well. We could let her out to go potty, and she'd come right back in, even if there were distractions or people or other dogs out. We did also always stand on the patio and watch her anyways, just because our pet agreement said that we couldn't leave our dog unattended. Then we would go pick up her droppings right away. Also, it was part of the pet agreement, as I'm sure it's standard at most apartment complexes. We kept a small step trash can right outside, specifically for her droppings, because we didn't want to throw them away inside, and the only outside trash cans were on the other side of the building, which I agree is super dumb. It really was a small trash can, like the kind you tuck in the bathroom between the toilet and the wall. We also had her droppings bag hanging on our patio door handle for easy access, so we didn't have to hunt for them every time we needed them. This entitled Karen and her kid moved in on the ground floor of our building, which was 2 units down from us. This was no big deal. We ran into her one day carrying in her groceries, and my significant other held open the door for her. She seemed kind of like a Karen, but was polite, and her kid, who was maybe 11 years old, didn't look up from his phone, which was kind of like, whatever, that's pretty typical of kids these days. They also had a dog. It was a little black and white fluffy thing, and it was super cute, but it was not very well trained. I don't know what kind of dog it was, but it was smaller than our already giant puppy. After about 2 weeks or so, we realized that there were dog droppings in the grass right off of our patio. We found out the hard way because my boyfriend stepped in it the first time. Luckily, he wasn't barefoot. They were very clearly not our dog's droppings, because for one, we always picked up the droppings right after she went, and secondly, they were very obviously from a small dog, not our 70-pound puppy. We'd been in the apartment about 7 to 8 months at that point and had never had an issue with this, so we figured it was the Karen's little dog. I wrote her a polite note that basically was like, "Hey neighbor, we noticed that some of your dog's droppings aren't being picked up and are right off of our patio. Per the pet agreement that we all have signed, we all need to be picking up our own dog's droppings each time they go. I'm sure it was an accident and you just didn't notice, so if you could make sure to do that going forward, we would really appreciate it." She wasn't home, so I slipped it under the door and went back to my apartment. A couple hours later though, this lady is banging on my door and gets really angry with me. She insists that it couldn't have been her dog, while also saying, "How dare you assume that it was?" I felt really bad and I apologized immediately. I said I didn't mean to offend her and it must have been someone else. She told me to never bother her with this garbage again, and then she stormed off in a huff. I was just thinking to myself, okay, whatever. Not even 3 days later, I was sitting on my patio with a book, enjoying the cool weather, when I see their little dog running out their back door. And as you can probably guess, no one's with the dog. And wouldn't you guess it, it comes over right to me. I said hello to the dog because I really do love dogs, and then it took a dump right off of my patio. It ran back home and scratched the door to be let in. I saw her kid slide the door open just enough to let the dog in, and then closed it again without coming outside to pick up the droppings. I was so annoyed because here I saw it with my own 2 eyes that yes, it was their stupid dog, and no one was even watching it when it was outside. So I grabbed a bag, picked up the note, wrote another less polite note about how her kid's neglecting to watch the dog and put the bag with the droppings and the note on their patio right by the door. Then I went right back to my reading. The entitled Karen was much quicker to come by this time and stomped right up to me, waving the note around like a mad lady. Then she stated that her kid was just a kid and probably just forgot to check. I said I don't really care. Her kid was old enough to stand outside for 3 minutes and come pick up her dog's droppings. She said to me, well, there's no droppings bags or trash cans on this side of the building, and that she didn't feel comfortable making her kid walk all the way around the building just for that. The next part is my own fault in hindsight. I suggested that she put a trash can like mine on her patio and leave their own dog droppings bags handy like we do for our own dog. She eyed our stuff, huffed some more, rolled her eyes, refused to do anything about the droppings this dog left behind, and then just walked off. Now at this point, I was super annoyed. I stalked my patio door for the next couple of days as much as I could. I was just waiting for something to happen. And sure enough, on day 2 in the evening, when I was about to give up, I see the puppy run outside towards my patio. I whipped out my phone, took some pictures of the dog outside, which was not allowed, as well as the dog taking a dump, and then took a picture an hour later of the dump this dog left still out there and time-stamped all of it. Then I sent an email to the apartment office people, who were always pretty nice, and they responded quickly that they would give her a warning about it. And sure enough, this lady comes back again. She is mad and yells at me, screaming, "You are so petty to report us to the office. We now have a $150 fine for not picking up that dump." It's also worth noting that these fines are incredibly rare. I mean, in order to fine someone for their dog taking a dump, they had to have some kind of proof that it was specifically this tenant's dog and that it wasn't picked up in a timely manner. Hence why I took so many photos and I had to timestamp everything. I told her that I had tried to be nice about it with her twice before, and it was her own fault at that point for not abiding by the terms of the pet agreement that, by the way, we all had to sign, which is exclusive to people with a dog. She went off about how she's a single mother and she works during the day and her precious baby can't be expected to pick up after their dog. I told her that a 10 or 11-year-old kid was plenty old enough to pick up after a dog, and that if they weren't responsible enough, then maybe the kid shouldn't be letting the dog out at all, and she should be the one to do it. Or maybe whoever is home with them should be looking after it. She got angry. She told me that I had no idea what it's like to be a single mom, that her mom stays with them during the day and shouldn't be expected to look after her kid and her dog, and then when she said that, she just stormed off. I expected to hear more about it, but thankfully I didn't. The ironic part is that I am a single mom. My kid isn't my significant other's, and I raised him alone for 2.5 years, all before I met my significant other. So yes, I do know how hard it is. And I live 1,000 miles away from my closest family, so I never even had the luxury of being able to have my mom watch my kids. Over the next couple of weeks, we didn't find any more dog droppings off of our patio, but we did notice our garbage bags were depleting, and our trash can was filling up more quickly than usual. I had my suspicions and I wanted to test it out. We had recently bought some small security cameras for inside our apartment, and this was for completely different reasons. So I had my boyfriend set one up outside on the patio. We faced it where we could see our door and trash can, but didn't point to the rest of the courtyard or other people's units. We wanted to try and respect people's privacy. Sure enough, the same evening my boyfriend set it up, I see the kid walk onto our patio, take one of the bags, walk out of frame, and then come back to throw it in our trash can. Okay, at this point, I'm furious, but also not trying to fight this lady or her kid. So I move the bags to the inside door handle. It's a glass door, so you can still see them, but we always lock our sliding door. The next morning, I hear someone knocking on the back patio door, and I go to see her kid standing there looking annoyed. I didn't open the door. I just spoke loudly enough to ask what he needed. He demanded a bag for his dog's droppings. I said to him, "Sorry, but these are our bags for our dog, and they were not free for anyone else to use. The apartment complex provides bags and a dispenser near the trash can on the other side of the building." This stupid entitled brat started demanding a bag, saying his mom told him that he could use ours, while also slapping his hand against the glass a few times. I mean, was he trying to scare me? Oh yes, I'm so terrified of a 10-year-old boy. He finally screamed at me that he's telling his mother on me. I said, "Fine, go ahead. I'll tell her the same thing." Sure enough, a few minutes later, his mom is standing on my patio, also demanding a bag for her dog's droppings. I denied her a bag and asked her to please step off of my patio, as she was making me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. She told me that I was a bratty child, despite the fact that I'm 24 years old, and she demanded that I let her use my bag bags, as I already told her that she could before. I said no. I told you to get some for yourself and do what I did. Keep them close by and put your own trash can out on your own patio. Not use the bags I buy with my own money for my own dog and then fill up my tiny trash can with your dog's droppings. I pointed out she could use a plastic shopping bag if she didn't want to buy her own bags, or she could just use the bags the complex provided on the other side of the building. She kept going off on me, and I finally told her if she didn't leave my patio, I would call the police, as now she was seriously bothering me. She acted like she was going to call my bluff, but then my boyfriend got home and walked up behind me to ask what was going on, and she ended up dragging her stupid kid away again, leaving the dog's droppings in the grass of my patio. So you know what I did? Once she was gone, I took another timestamp photo of the dog droppings. I downloaded the footage of my security camera of her kids stealing my bags and throwing them in my trash can, and the footage from them that morning yelling at me, demanding my bags, along with me denying them access to any of that. I then emailed all of that to the apartment management. I told them that she made me feel very unsafe and uncomfortable in my own home, that she and her child felt entitled to come onto my patio and take my belongings. I also went outside, picked up her dog's droppings, looked in the trash can of my patio, and pulled out all the bags with her dog's droppings in it. I opened all the bags, and I dumped the droppings straight on her patio right outside the door. On Monday, I heard back from the office lady who said she'd taken care of it, and by Friday, there was a moving truck, and the lady and her kid were moving out. I'm pretty sure they were evicted, or at the very least, urged very strongly to move out before a formal eviction was initiated. After talking to some of my other much friendlier neighbors, it turns out we weren't the only ones who had been complaining about her. They'd only lived in the complex for maybe 3 months, and by that time they had already made so many enemies. And then all of a sudden they're just kicked out. Sometimes I think I should feel bad for playing a part and them getting evicted, but honestly I can't bring myself to feel guilty about any of it. It is not my fault she was a lazy, entitled Karen who couldn't even be bothered to get a shopping bag to pick up her dog's dump. I never heard about the dump I dropped on her patio, but I'd like to think she stepped in them without looking and knew better than to come to me and try and yell about it. Wow, what an entitled Karen. Not only was she blatantly letting her dog take a dump on this lady's back patio, but she was also just completely in the wrong. Instead of rectifying the situation and buying her own stuff, she instead tried to start stealing from this person. Like, what an awful person and an awful parent to boot. Like, look at the way her spoiled, rotten child was acting. This little brat was smacking the back patio door, pretending like he had any authority over the bags he was blatantly stealing. Like, what an entitled jerk. Are you serious right now? But honestly, the original poster did it right. If someone's doing something like this on your property and you have evidence of it, you need to not only take pictures of it, but if you can, absolutely record it as well. This lady was nuts. She had no business treating anybody like that. But the fact that there's proof of this crazy Karen acting like this and stealing from her and doing all this weird stuff is the only reason she got evicted. Just imagine if she had covered her tracks and this went on for months at a time. The original poster very easily could have been the one that moved out instead of this Karen. So the moral of the story is record everything, because otherwise you're gonna have entitled Karen stealing your stuff as well as letting their stupid dogs take a dump on your back patio. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Am I the jerk for kicking my girlfriend out in the middle of her capstone project for graduate school, jeopardizing the future of her degree? Here's what happened. So to start things out, I'm a 21-year-old male and I'm a twin. And we can call my brother Matthew for the sake of anonymity. Matthew is not his real name. To get ahead of some of the most commonly asked questions, yes, we are identical. We do things in sync sometimes, but I don't know if it's any more common than two people who just spend a lot of time together and adopt each other's mannerisms. I would absolutely say that the twin intuition thing is real. We have two older brothers and I love them, but I'm not as close to them as I am with Matthew. We have never been away from each other for longer than maybe 3 days. We don't technically live together, but we stay in the same apartment building for college and often just fall asleep in each other's places. My girlfriend and I have a long distance relationship and we've been doing this for basically our entire relationship. I'm busy with school and the music myself as well as Matthew are working on together. She lives about 2 hours away and is busy with her job and her graduate program. To make a long, somewhat confusing explanation short, she's staying with me for the summer, working shorter hours remotely while she fulfills an in-person grad school requirement at the university I currently attend. Most of her grad program has been online. This particular section is not. It's her capstone project project, and doing it during the summer basically means she's doing it in double time, so she really has to buckle down and work. And trust me, I totally get that. But still, the way she's been treating my brother isn't cool with me. She often rolls her eyes and shuts herself in our guest bedroom when she comes home and sees that he's over. We do smoke together and we do mess around on our guitars together, and this is all while we work on our music, which is something she's been fond of, but now it seems like she hates it. The final straw came last week when I got a phone call while I was out of her freaking out. She had refused to let my brother in the apartment, so he used the key I had given him, and she just lost it. She said her boundaries weren't being respected and that I needed to kick him out, so I told her she just needs to leave. She is now furious, saying that she can't find somewhere else to stay on such short notice, and I'm messing up the most important class of her life, saying I'm too codependent on my brother and that I should have never told her she could stay when I knew she needed to work and I wasn't allowing her to do so. So honestly, am I the jerk for kicking out my girlfriend, especially since she's been mistreating my brother? What should I do? Honestly, to me, I can kind of see both sides of this. On one side, it really is okay that your brother can be there. Like, there's obviously a dynamic here that your girlfriend clearly just doesn't respect in the slightest. I mean, he does have a key to your apartment, so it's not like he's a stranger at your apartment. So it's kind of surprising that your girlfriend is not only trying to make decisions for the apartment, especially when she's not even like talking to you about it first, which is really not okay in my opinion, but also she's really mistreating your brother in a way that I really would not appreciate either. But on the other side of this, your girlfriend is going through a graduate program. First and foremost, she probably should have explained clearly that she doesn't want any distractions, and so she doesn't want your brother over there while she's working. I think if that had been properly explained, you probably could have been prepped to tell your brother to be like, hey, sorry, but you can't come over. That, in my opinion, would have been very appropriate, and it would have been completely reasonable and understandable. But instead, it seems like we went from 0 to 100 really quickly, and I think that lack of communication is probably where this frustration is coming from. Instead of just outright saying, hey, don't bring your brother over, she's now freaking out and trying to kick him out, even though he has a key to the apartment. But to your girlfriend's defense, this class that she's taking is probably really difficult. It's a capstone course. This is the collective information of everything she's been studying. She needs to pass this class, otherwise she's going to be in deep trouble. So unfortunately, despite the lack of communication, despite the fact that she's trying to kick your brother out, unfortunately, I really do think she's right in this situation. She needs to have peace and quiet, and she needs to have some way of getting all this work done. That means no distractions and no guitar playing while she's working. I think that's completely reasonable, and I really do think you need to see this from her perspective. So if your brother wants to hang out, then just flip the script and say, hey, let's go to your place. I mean, your brother does have his own apartment, right? There's no reason that you and your brother can't go over to his apartment and try and get your work done as well as work on music. Because at the end of the day, your girlfriend is under a lot of stress. And while she absolutely was out of line trying to kick your brother out of the house, you are also out of line for kicking her out of the apartment in the middle of her capstone project. So if anything, I really think you need to apologize and make this right. Because her priority of trying to graduate graduate school is really important. And if you really want to do music with your brother, then take it over to his apartment. My entitled neighbor's kid is bothering me and my family constantly by literally being a nuisance right outside my house to anybody that visits us. So as a result, we're putting up a fence, and I honestly can't wait to have that fence up just to block out that stupid kid. Here's what happened. So a couple of months ago or so, we put up a private driveway do not enter sign. The 13-year-old kid next door mocked it daily, catching him on Ring camera anytime he did it, as well as seeing it with my own 2 eyes. Then one night, the private driveway sign disappeared, coincidentally around the time that the kid was hanging nearby the sign. The Ring camera did not pick him up moving the sign, but more than likely it was him. I also spoke to him and his mother in the past, asking the kids to stay on their own property, but that fell on deaf ears. So the kid, anytime we would get a delivery, he's outside, saying in a really snotty tone, "This is a private driveway, keep out." He's done this to utility workers, delivery people, pretty much anybody who temporarily parks in our driveway, even someone who's a guest at our house. I guess because he figures we permit delivery people and our guests to use our driveway, he must think that he can do so too. And no, I'm not going to ask him yet again to stay off my property. I just don't feel like opening that can of worms, for lack of a better term. I mean, really, I spoke to both the mother and the kid themselves, and the behavior still continues. We are putting up a fence between our properties, and that fence cannot get installed fast enough. It feels like we've been waiting forever for the parts to arrive, much less get the installation scheduled. scheduled. I really want to have the attorney send a letter, but I'm worried that the kid will mess with the survey property markers before the fence goes up. Truthfully, I'm surprised he hasn't messed with those markers already. He tried more than once moving the old ones in the backyard, so that's why we had new ones put in. Although the flag markers are quite easy to remove. There is rebar the surveyor also pounded into the ground, but the flag markers, they are there for the fencing installer to know the property markers. I mean, really, when I spoke to the mother about it, she simply said that she'll speak to her kid, but she was like, oh, well, kids will be kids. And you know what? To that, I say no. I'm sorry, that is not what a good kid does. This is what a disrespectful kid does. A kid that does not know any boundaries. So I've done everything I can do. We have security cameras in case of retaliation, but obviously security cameras don't pick up everything because I didn't pick up who actually removed the driveway sign. And truthfully, I really don't want to invest more money for more high-tech security cameras. Honestly, I just want this nightmare to end, and I cannot wait for this fence to go up. That seriously sounds so annoying. I've had bad neighbors, and honestly, they are so frustrating. I honestly think that any given person would just want to live their life in peace. I personally don't want to be bothered by my neighbors. I don't want them up in my business, and I definitely don't want their stupid kids on my property. So honestly, I'm right there with you. If I had some stupid kid who was bothering me constantly and always trying to mess with my stuff and steal my property, I would also put up a fence. I wouldn't deal with that for a second. This kid is clearly just trying to mess with you, and he better count himself lucky for not getting caught on camera, because you very easily could have reported him to the police and really gotten him in a lot of trouble. So hopefully this all works out for you, because the way your neighbors and that stupid kid and his parents are acting is honestly so annoying. And hopefully with this fence up, this garbage will eventually stop. An entitled Karen demands to take my seat on an airplane, but even after I showed her my boarding passes, she still refused to take no for an answer, screaming at the top of her lungs that she deserved my seats more than me. Here's what happened. So I have a son who is currently 2.5 years old, but we've been traveling by plane since he was about 6 months old due to our living an 18-hour drive away from family. In the United States, you generally don't need to buy a plane ticket for a child under 2 years old. You can buy a seat if you want to bring your baby in their carrier or if you just want to use a car seat, but they can also be considered a lap child and sit in your lap for free. When my son was about 1.5 years old, we were flying back to my hometown to go visit my family. We were flying on an airline which is named the opposite of Northeast, if you know what I mean. On this airline, an adult with a child under 6 years old gets to board right after some of the first boarding numbers and before the last section of the plane. And this was very helpful to get some extra time to find a seat and settle in with my kid. Now, he was under 2 years old, so he could have flown for free and sat in my lap. But after the flight we had taken a few months before that, where he was absolutely a nightmare on wheels, and I was mortified by how terrible we probably made everybody else's flight, I decided to buy him a plane ticket so we would have a little bit more room for our things, namely a diaper bag, toys to entertain him with, snacks, juice and milk, a blanket, you name it. I hated to feel like I was inconveniencing other passengers with my child when I had to keep him to such a small confined space to begin with. It was better to give him some extra room in the form of his own seat so as not to crowd others when he wanted to get out of my lap to try and look out the window or do other stuff. Plus, I could then sit between him and provide a buffer for his wayward feet. He was generally and still is a really good little traveler, but every 1.5-year-old has their moments, as other parents can definitely understand. I mean, I swear I do my best to keep him under control. Now, if you've ever flown with a child under 2 years old as a lap child, you should know that when you go to check your bags at the airport, you get a normal boarding pass for yourself, as well as a boarding pass for the child that clearly says lap infant across the top of it. Otherwise, if you buy your child a ticket, they get a normal boarding pass like everybody else with your boarding group and number. Now, this airline has rows of 3 seats on either side of a very narrow aisle. I tend to stick to the far back rows just in case I need to leave the seat with him when we're in the air, and also to try and put some distance between us and other passengers. So we board with family boarding. I grab 2 seats all the way in the very back row, shove all of our stuff into the seat, and go about trying to settle our things in. My son decided to sit in the seat by the window and was watching the ground crew do their thing. I was sitting in the middle seat beside him. The aisle seat was empty, and the plane started to fill up. But again, we were at the very last row, so most people found a seat before they made it to us. When the plane was about 3/4 full, I hear someone say, excuse me? And this was in a rather snobby voice. I turned to see a woman woman who was maybe in her 30s with a little girl maybe 7 or 8 years old. Before I could even respond, this entitled Karen demands that I move to the aisle seat and take my son with me so that her daughter could sit by the window. Now, I want to say that if my son was flying free and was a lap infant, I wouldn't have an issue with moving to an aisle seat, just to let the little girl sit by the window, especially if the mom had asked me nicely. However, I had purchased 2 tickets with my own money, which isn't easy to swing when you're a single mom too, by the way. And even if I moved to the aisle seat, my son would have the middle seat and she'd have to separate from her daughter. I was not going to be used as someone else's babysitter for someone else's kid on a flight, even if I didn't have my own child to deal with. I tried to explain this to her, and it went something like this. I said to her, "Oh, I would totally move, but I bought 2 seats, and even if I did move, there'd be only 1 seat open, so you might want to try somewhere else so you can both sit together." There were still rows that were empty on the plane at this point. This entitled Karen then looked at me and said, "You're lying. He's clearly not even 2 yet, and under 2 they fly for free and they sit in your lap. Please move right now." I look at her and I say, yes, they can fly for free in your lap, but I specifically bought him his own ticket so he could have his own seat and more room. There are several rows a bit farther forward that are still empty, and they still do have window seats. She then says, "Well, he's small. You should just hold him. My daughter wants to sit by the window, and I need to be in the last row. So just hold him so we can sit here." I look at her and I say, "I'm really sorry, but no, we need the extra space. I bought and paid for the extra seat, and I'm not going to give it up just because you feel entitled to this space. Our things are already settled and stowed away." At this point, this entitled Karen is working herself up into a tizzy and has caught the attention of the older couple sitting across the aisle. The husband tries to tell this entitled Karen to just choose somewhere else to sit, but she snapped at him to mind his own business, which is kind of hard to do inside of such a small space. So when she turned her attention back to me and my now fussing child because this ugly, strange lady is yelling at mommy, the wife waved down one of the flight attendants who eventually came over. The flight attendant said, "Ma'am, is this child a lap infant?" I said to her, "He is less than 2 years old," but before I could even finish, this entitled Karen screams, "See, I told you, make her move right now." I then continued. I said to her, "But I did purchase a ticket because I knew he would appreciate having some extra space to get out of my lap." At that point, I had grabbed both of our normal paying customer boarding passes and handed them to the flight attendant. The entitled Karen then says, "That doesn't prove anything. They give boarding passes to lap infants all the time." The flight attendant turns back to the entitled Karen and says to her, "Yes, they do give boarding passes for lap infants, but this is not a lap infant boarding pass. So I'm sorry, but she paid for that seat and there's no assigned seating, so you can't ask her to move." The entitled Karen then starts going crazy, screaming at me, at the flight attendant, and eventually her own kid is crying. But I think it may have been more out of embarrassment rather than the flight attendant and me telling them no. Eventually, the flight attendant kept telling this entitled Karen that she would be removed from the plane by air marshals if she didn't find a different seat. The entitled Karen huffed angrily, promised to write a terrible review, and told the flight attendant specifically that she was going to call corporate office and have her fired for treating this entitled Karen and her daughter so poorly. The flight attendant rolled her eyes where only I and the other couple could see, and she apologized for this crazy Karen's actions. The rest of the flight went incredibly smoothly. My kid laughed when the plane took off and then passed out in his own seat with his head on my leg about 20 minutes into the flight and slept the whole time, and the flight attendant gave me a complimentary glass of wine while he was asleep. I eventually saw the entitled Karen inside the airport afterwards as we made our way to baggage, berating a cleaning staff member because the airport Burger King was closed, even though it was 11:30 at night, as if the poor staff member even had control over that in the first place. So as a last-second form of revenge, I pointed a TSA person towards them and went on my merry way. Honestly, how did this entitled Karen not get thrown off the plane? Like, the way she was acting was so incredibly inappropriate. There's no excuse for acting like that. Like, she seriously was screaming at the top of her lungs, all because someone was claiming the seat that they bought. Like, what is wrong with that lady? I will never understand how someone will act like this in public. It seriously is not only incredibly cringy, but it also makes you look like a complete idiot. How can someone really go about acting like that and still try to save face in any kind of way? Honestly, good for the original poster for standing your ground. This entitled Karen was completely out of line, and the way she was acting was incredibly crazy. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Am I the jerk for asking my wife to move on and clear out some of the stuff stuff from her mother, who passed away several months ago. Here's what happened. So for a bit of context, I've been together with my wife for 8 years and I love her dearly. Her mother passed away in January. They were close and it's been hard for her, especially as her dad passed away a long time ago when she was very little, and she doesn't have any siblings. She feels like she needs to keep her family history alive, which has led into a hoarding situation. Basically, when her mother passed, my wife had a hard time letting go. We emptied her mother's house and managed to sell it, but my wife insisted on keeping several boxes of family heirlooms. Stuff like dishware, lamps, books. It was mostly useless things, but it was important to her, as well as ordinary things that belonged to her mother, like dresses, shoes, pillows, albums, stuff like that. For months, these boxes filled our storage room, an entire wall of our living room, one corner of my office, 2 kitchen cabinets, and our shed. I get that she's sad, but I've repeatedly asked her to sort through these boxes because we can't keep on living like this. She said that she wasn't ready to throw away any of these things that were very near and dear to her mother's heart and asked me to give her more time. Mind you, her mother passed away in January, so it's been months already. So yesterday when she was at work, I had finally had enough. I went through the boxes myself. I threw away everything that was useless and burnt everything that was made out of paper or similar material, besides any photos. I managed to empty out the shed and clear my office of her things. I did expect her to be a bit upset, but she went livid when she got home. She kept crying for hours and wouldn't speak to me. Now she's saying she wants me to go to my parents' house because she can't stand to look at me. I pointed out that we own this house together and that she cannot kick me out. I understand that she needs time, but I need my living space. And ultimately, I was just trying to help her move on. So honestly, am I the jerk for throwing away my wife's things? This is seriously crazy. Like, this is the most heartless thing I think anyone's ever done. First and foremost, you are a terrible person for doing this. Yes, you are the jerk and you're an awful husband. Like, seriously, what are you thinking? You not only threw away her stuff that her mother had, but you also lit it on fire? Like, what are you, some kind of supervillain? You literally lit on fire all the stuff that you didn't want to keep around just to try and get rid of it? Like, what is going on here? I cannot wrap my head around why you think that would be okay. That is such a massive betrayal of trust, and honestly, that is so extreme, it's not even funny. Your wife is literally alone in this world. She has no other family, and the thing she did have to try and preserve some semblance of family history belonged to her mother, and you literally lit that on fire. You quite literally burned down her family tree by doing that, and you seriously should be ashamed of yourself. I don't blame her for not wanting to be with you. I mean, this is honestly a deal breaker in my opinion. If you really wanted to help her out and get her going when it comes to like sorting through this, you should have rolled up your sleeves and helped her out. You should have said, okay, this Saturday, let's look through all this stuff and figure out what's okay to keep and what needs to go. And the only person who can make that judgment call literally is your wife. Like, her grieving doesn't follow your schedule. You are an awful person, and legitimately, this is all on you. So hopefully your wife can find some kind of solace in her life, because as far as I'm concerned, the original poster is a heartless jerk, and what they did is absolutely unacceptable. Am I the jerk for having an issue with my boyfriend's family constantly violating my privacy in our apartment? Here's what happened. So I recently moved in with my boyfriend. Let's call him John. John is not his real name. John is also from India and had moved to the US for college and now work. We live in his apartment in New York City, but over the past few months since I moved in, I've noticed a weird issue. While John's family is based in India, several of his family members have shifted to New York City just in the past couple of years so that they can go to school, work, and other things. About 5 of them live in the city, and I'm unsure of their specific relationship to each other, but he treats them all like siblings, despite there being an age range between 18 to 32. And that's between all 5 of them. And this also falls in line with the fact that none of them are actually his real siblings. The problem, though, is that I realize his family members just show up to the apartment whenever they feel like it. They all have keys, and they all come in and out throughout the week, sometimes randomly staying the night in the guest room, coming over to watch TV, or make some food, even when John and I are not at home. This was incredibly jarring for me, because it felt like there was no privacy to be within the house when all these people could just come in, borrow things, and use the apartment and then just leave. It's not that they made a mess or broke things, but it was just them using our apartment as their own. Yesterday, I had come home and one of his younger sisters, around 19 years old, was cooking something in the kitchen, and having had a long, tiring day, I had just wanted to come home to a silent, quiet apartment, and I honestly just wanted to relax. But I was upset immediately by the noise and the smell. smell, and I asked her why she thought she had the random right to come into our apartment whenever she felt like it and use whatever she wanted. She didn't reply but looked extremely offended, and that really bothered me. I asked her to get out of the house, and she did, muttering things under her breath at me in Hindi, which is a language I don't understand. That night, John came home and asked me why I had been so mean to his sister and kicked her out of the house. I said I was sick and tired of them coming over, and from now on, they're not allowed in the house without letting us know beforehand. John said I was being a massive jerk to his family, as well as disrespecting what they provide for us and his duty to provide for all of them. We haven't talked since, and he slept on the couch last night. So now I'm seriously at a crossroads and I don't know what to do. It really sounds like you should have communicated this with John well before you said anything to one of his siblings. Like, obviously you moved into his apartment, not the other way around. This was probably a setup well before you were even considered in this relationship, and it really does sound like John comes from a very different type of family. Like, I kind of think there's some kind of cultural barrier here that you just don't understand, and I really think you should have talked to John well before you offended his sister. Because think about it, maybe family's really important to John. Maybe he really does want his family to come around and spend time at his house, and instead of asking him about it and maybe trying to set up some kind of boundaries or something along those lines, you instead jumped over the person who could explain what's happening and decided to take things into your own hands, even though this apartment is not yours. Like, you literally live with John. So in my opinion, I think you kind of crossed the line. And don't get me wrong, I totally get that you want privacy and some kind of security in your apartment, but that absolutely should have been discussed well before you got into that apartment. And it sounds like you have all these boundaries that you want for your apartment, but it doesn't sound like you've communicated those at all. And that's nobody's fault except for your own. Like, I'm sorry, but John and his family can't read your mind. I think if you at least talked about this ahead of time, this really could have avoided a lot of problems for John and his family. An entitled customer grabs my arm trying to get my attention so that he can order his food, but I simply wasn't going to take that, so I decided to yell at him and put him in his place. Here's what happened. So I work at a rooftop bar in a big city. The manager and I have occasional problems, but overall he's got our back. We wear relatively tight dresses, and it's a bar where guys get stupid, but we're lucky in that we don't have many incidents of guests getting drunk and acting inappropriate, and when they do, we've been assured our manager would have our back. Once, two finance bros called our runner an awful name. My manager overheard the runner telling us what happened and immediately asked where they were seated. He walked right up to them, asked if they did indeed say what they said, and they said, "Yeah, dude, but it was a joke." The manager said to him, "I don't care, get out." They tried to argue that they were just joking, but he just kept saying that he didn't care and that he would get security if they didn't leave, and they eventually did, embarrassed out of their mind. Now, I'm not a confrontational person at all, but working in such a high volume place has helped me be a bit less afraid of it, especially knowing my manager has my back. We were insanely busy one day, way over capacity, and doing the best that we could. I'm literally power walking back and forth, trying to take care of everyone, and as I'm walking towards the kitchen, this guy who was sitting down on the terrace doesn't even say anything to get my attention. He just straight up grabs my arm and pulls me towards him as I'm walking past. I literally lost my balance for a second because of how he yanked me towards him. I freaking lost it, and I just went off on him. I told him to never touch me or any other server ever again, and whatever you want is going to have to wait even longer now, because I'm not helping someone who thinks it's okay to act like that. He put his tail between his legs and immediately started apologizing, and as I walked away, I saw the woman he was sitting with just yelling at him. I told my manager what happened, and he just nodded his head and said, "Good job. If he does it again, you can kick him out yourself." The guy was a perfect gentleman for the rest of the night, because every time he ordered something from me, the woman with him was just staring, like mothers making sure their children didn't misbehave. I could feel how tightly his body was clenching. It honestly makes such a difference when your boss doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior and cares more about his employees than his customers. It's sad that in my experience, it's a rarity in this industry. That is honestly awful. I can't imagine working a job like that and having someone literally getting physical with me just to try and get me to take their order. Like, that is so inappropriate, it's not even funny. Like, seriously, what was that guy thinking? Did he really think grabbing this lady and pulling him towards her would be appropriate? Did he think that she would laugh and think it was okay? Like, no, that is never okay. You don't treat people like that. And the original poster's correct. This was only made possible because the manager did not take this for a second. They would kick people out if they were rude to their servers. And honestly, in my opinion, especially from my own experience in customer service, business, that's exactly how it should be. Your manager needs to have your back, because if they don't have your back, then who will? Like legitimately, who's gonna come to your defense and try and ward off these weirdos who come to your restaurant? So good for the original poster and the manager for standing up for themselves, because if you're gonna work at customer service, the least you can expect is not only to have respect from the customers, but also to have some semblance of order and structure. Am I the jerk for snapping at a woman who asked what was wrong with my son? Here's what happened. So my son is 14 months old. He has a feeding tube which he is currently being weaned from. He has this because when he was born, he was ventilated for a long time, so he didn't develop the suck, swallow, breathe reflex. He is also missing one of the bones in his forearm. On his arm, he also just has a single digit. I took him shopping and he was sat in the cart, just being his usual happy self, playing with a toy that I'd attached to the cart. Whenever I take him out, and he kind of becomes the center of attention, especially when his arm is on display, it attracts people asking me questions about his condition. Usually, I don't mind people asking questions, especially if they're asking in behalf of little kids. I know it's curiosity from kids, but from adults, it feels like ignorance, especially when I'm asked what I did wrong when I was pregnant. During this trip, an older lady, maybe in her 50s, walked past us before looking back at my son and then turning around and asked me, "What's wrong with him?" She asked it in such a snotty tone. I kind of snapped back at her and I told her it was none of her business. She asked me why I didn't cover it up because it was unsightly, referring to his arm. So I asked her why she didn't cover up her face for the exact same reason, and then I just walked away. I don't usually engage with rude people, but I just kind of snapped. We had been stopped several times on that trip alone, asking if he was okay, or if his arm will grow back, which is something a little kid asked me, or to be told that they'll pray for him to get better. I was just fed up of being asked, and then this lady comes along and was just rude to me. When I told my partner when he came home, he told me I should have just walked away and not engaged in that, because it's not a good example to be showing our son if I'm rude to people. I do feel a bit bad for engaging with her, but at the same time, no one has the right to talk about my son like that. So am I the jerk for snapping at this lady after she made a rude comment about my son? No, you are absolutely not the jerk. That lady was up in your business. She clearly thought she could say some weird, snotty thing towards you and try and get away with it. She even tried to say, "Oh, you need to cover up that unsightly arm." Like at that point, the gloves are off. If she wants to make comments like that, congratulations, she's gonna get it in return. And if I was in your shoes, I would have done the exact same thing. Absolutely no one's gonna talk to my kid like that, especially when you get comments about your kid all the time. Like honestly, why can't people just straight up mind their own business? Is it really that hard to look the other way and not try and make a big deal about other people's differences? Like that's so disrespectful, and honestly, I don't blame you for snapping, because from the sounds of it, you get this all the time, and that stupid entitled lady absolutely had it coming. My entitled landlord tries to sue me over false claims that I had ruined his townhouse and that I was responsible for this guy's negligence. But I was not about to take that sitting down. So not only did I take him to court and win, but I forced him to pay me back all the money that he owed me. And I've never been more satisfied to take anyone down in my life. Here's what happened. So for a bit of background, my first husband was not a very nice man. For 6 years, I was belittled and basically a baby factory for him. He was a fantastic father, but he was a horrible husband. After he finally got his heirs, I was then treated even worse until I finally woke up and decided to leave him. Now, this revenge story is not about him, but I had to set the scene of what's gonna happen. I moved out from the house, taking my clothes, my car, and my computer. I had nothing. I stayed at my best friend's house for a couple of weeks before I was able to line up an awful townhouse with roommates. I had no furniture, and my bed was a cat urine smelling free couch I was able to score. I wound up with about 3 or 4 jobs, with one of them being full-time, and once a week, I would not even be able to sleep a night between jobs, meaning I was having to stay up for almost 48 hours a day. Now, fast forward to 1 year later, and my divorce is finalized, and I had fulfilled my year's lease for my townhouse. By this time, from all my hard work, I had furnished the home. I had furnished my bedroom and my kids' room when they would be with me for visitation. Now, my scumbag landlord was a nice landlord for the most part, and this was all during the time of me renting there. I was a good tenant. I was never late with my rent, and although I had roommates, I was the sole name on the lease. My landlord would show up often with some guys that he had to work on something like plumbing tests or whatever else excuse he could come up with, just so he could be all creepy and hang around trying to converse with me with mildly suggestive undertones that made me quite uneasy crazy at times. Finally, the lease was fulfilled and I was now onto a month-to-month contract, to which at that time I was ready to move out of this awful townhouse, and I was ready to find a great house in the mountains nearby. And I was honestly simply thrilled that now that I have my feet on the ground, I can finally afford something better than living in the slums. My lease stated that I had to give 1 month's notice in order to move out. Unfortunately, I was able to get the house I was to move into for the next month, and that was only 3 weeks away. I sent an email to my landlord stating that I intended on moving out at the end of this month, which was exactly 3 weeks away, and he can try and find another tenant, but I did state that if he did not find a tenant, I would still fulfill my legal obligation and pay next month's rent. Within 1 week, 2 weeks before I was to move out, he emailed me back and stated that was very generous of my offer, but he was able to find a new tenant for the beginning of the next month, meaning that I essentially would be off the hook. He even tipped his hand by stating that he already collected a deposit from them. Now, something happened within a couple of days after that, which was no fault of my own, nor my roommates in the slightest. The townhouse came with its own appliances, stuff like a fridge or an oven, including the washer and the dryer on the main level. My roommate had put a load of laundry in and went to the living room to have a nap. He suddenly woke up to find the washer had malfunctioned with the sensory switch, which never stopped the water filling stage, and there was now an inch of water in the kitchen and living room. He splashed through the water to turn off the washer and called me to come and help deal with this. I was just getting off of work, and I ran home to assess the damage, and let me tell you, it was bad. There was standing water on top of the living room carpet and a good inch of water in the whole kitchen. I called the landlord and I told him the issue. By the time the landlord showed up, I had already got most of the standing water out with the help of my roommate as well as friends that showed up with shop vacs. The landlord didn't seem too upset, which was surprising for me, and had an appliance repairman with him that was coming out to look at the washer. The repairman even said, "Yep, here's the culprit," and showed him that the dial would stick on the fill stage and wouldn't click over to the agitate stage. After replacing the dial and the lubricating for the whole dial, he eventually left. The next week was chaos, as I was busy trying to pack, and the landlord had insurance guys in the house, assessing the damage for any claims, and workers were taking out the carpet and cutting 2 feet worth of the lower drywall of the whole main level. The day of the move, though I was still supposed to be there for a couple more days, the landlord had let himself in as movers were moving out my stuff with a camera going around taking pictures of everything. I honestly thought that this was for his insurance claims. I actually felt bad for the landlord at the time, and I told him that I would not ask for any of my deposit back, and he responded in front of the loading crew and my roommate, "Thank you, that's very generous of you." We eventually parted ways, and I thought that was that, but boy was I wrong. 2 weeks into my new home location, my previous landlord showed up on my doorstep with a summons to appear in arbitration because he was suing me. So I thought to myself, what are you talking about? On what grounds is he suing me on? He stated it's all in this paperwork and handed me a manila envelope with 18 pages of everything he was charging me with, all of which including photos. So now I knew why he was taking pictures in the first place, nickel and diming me on everything, from scuffs on the wall to bent up objects, and then he also wanted me to pay his insurance deductible as well as the following month's rent. He claimed that the tenants that he had lined up backed out at the last minute, claiming they didn't think the place would be ready in time with all the drywall and painting they still had to do. So he still wanted me to pay that month's rent. I thought to myself, really? No, I don't think so. I knew I was more than generous of giving him my whole deposit, and then for him to come back and sue me for thousands of dollars, he was not only claiming the damages caused by the flood, but also improvements he needed to do that should never be or have been my responsibility in the first place. Even cracks in the living room wall that was from the building settling. How should I be responsible for that? He wanted new lighting, new faucets, all mainly on the accusation that I was being negligent. But you know what? I wasn't gonna have any of that. I know that this place was a slummy townhouse complex, and most of his tenants were on welfare. Maybe he could get away with this with other people, but absolutely not me. No way. I just got out of a marriage that made me feel insignificant, and I had horrible self-esteem, but now I had my dignity, and I felt strong for the first time in a long time. No way was I gonna let any more garbage happen to me without doing something about it. I had 10 days before the date of my arbitration meeting. I immediately got to work, first getting a signed deposition from the very repairman that had showed up that day, stating that the the appliance was quite in need of maintenance work, and the last time he had done any maintenance for him was almost 5 years before. From thoroughly reviewing my rental contract and the local laws, the landlord is obligated to have all appliances maintained and serviced every single year. I had also talked to some of the other tenants and had heard that this wasn't the first time that this landlord had sued tenants after the fact. I hunted them down and got sworn statements from them as well. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know what to do and mostly didn't show up to arbitration, hence why the landlord would be winning by default. But there was absolutely no way I was going to let him do that to me. I then drew up a rebuttal to each and every claim he had, including photos from the year that I had lived there. I printed out all the email correspondence and even convinced my ex-roommate and one of the movers that heard my interaction with the landlord about him stating how generous it was of me letting him keep my whole deposit, which was, by the way, a significant amount. The day of the arbitration comes around, and I dressed up in my power suit and with my ex-roommate and worker in tow, I showed up at the meeting. Now, in Canada, arbitration is not held in a courtroom per se, but it still is held at the courthouse, in a conference room with a judge. We had 1 hour with this judge. Since the landlord was the plaintiff, he got to go first in the case. He spent over 40 minutes going over everything, and I sat quietly until he finished. Once he finished, I then hauled out the rebuttal in multiple copies, handed it to the judge, to the landlord, and anyone else that wished to have one, and I quickly went over each point. The landlord was irate and interrupted almost every second sentence I spoke. I would pause the moment he would start talking, and I would say sweetly, "I was quiet and polite during your time to present your case. I hope you grant me the same respect." The landlord started to get red in the face, especially when I got to the deposition of the maintenance worker for the appliance. I included with that the Tenancy and Landlord Act sections pertaining to appliance maintenance and stated that this was the only record of maintenance that had occurred, and unless he can come up with more recent records from perhaps another company, it was over 5 years since anything had been looked at. With my defense, I had also then countered that I would like my deposit back and my day's pay from work since I had to take that day off to go to this meeting. The judge then made his statement, and I will always remember this for the rest of my life. He stated that first, he was very impressed by my presentation and that I obviously have a good handle on things and can tell that my nature is of kindness and respect, especially with photos of how I had the townhouse furnished and how clean and how much pride I put into it, as well as with any home that I would live in. The bottom line is that not only did I win my case, I wound up having my landlord owing me over 80% of my deposit back, including interest. The landlord's face was priceless. The judge then proceeded to tell this landlord that they will be reviewing again all of his previous filings, and if there was enough evidence of him mistreating previous tenants, he would be reported to the Board of Landlords and Tenants. Now, I walked away that day feeling on top of the world, completely justified, and he got a taste of his own medicine. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. Knowing that this guy has a history of suing tenants, I printed up my final results, the ones with the judge's signature, and I gave a copy to each and every tenant in that complex. I wanted to warn everyone of his practices and to keep notes, photos, and everything so that he couldn't do that to them. But I didn't stop there. He still owed me money, and I asked repeatedly for the payment, but he never responded. He had until a certain day to pay me back my deposit, and on that day, I had gone to his house and knocked on the door. He didn't answer the door even though I knew he was home. I rang the bell a few more times and knocked very loudly. He then turned his house alarm on, which at first startled me, but quickly turned to humor because I was seeing just how much of a coward this bully was turning out to be. I then yelled loud enough that I'm not going anywhere. He then yells, "Get off my property or I'm gonna call the police." So I think, okay, no problem. I get off the property, but I camped out on the front sidewalk. I had a fold-up chair, a cooler with water and sodas, a few sandwiches, and all my paperwork with me. I was set to stay there forever. I would then tell anyone that walked by, and already there were some people there from the house alarm fiasco, about how I was a tenant, and this guy wrongfully sued me, and that I have a claim against him, and he now owes me money. I let anyone look at the paperwork too, by the way, just to back up my claim. The police eventually did show up. They first went to talk to the landlord, and he was claiming that I was bothering him, while also making the unjust claim that I was slandering him and that I wouldn't leave his property. But I was on public property, meaning the sidewalk, and it isn't slander to tell the truth, of which I had my court-signed paperwork to back me up. I wasn't disturbing the peace. I was simply and quietly seated outside his home and just talking to his neighbors about his his actions. He was out yelling that I needed to leave, and I quietly stated that I would be happy to leave once I am paid what he legally owes me. I was not going to leave before I get money in my hand, and I was more than willing to stay there and tell anyone that would listen to me why I was camped out there in the first place. The police stated I wasn't doing anything wrong, that it was public property that I was sitting on, and I wasn't disturbing the peace, and it isn't slander if it's true. Finally, after an hour of the landlord yelling on his front lawn at the policeman, and at me of course, did his wife come out with the money. She handed the money to the police, of which in turn handed the money to me, and signed off documenting final payment was complete. I sweetly smiled. I thanked the police deeply, and I went home. I have no idea whatever happened to that stupid landlord, or if he's still pulling this garbage like he did on me, but I hope that I at least help put the fear of God in him, and that he remembers that he can't screw with people, because eventually it will come and bite him right in the butt. This original poster is seriously awesome. They not only worked their way out of a horrible marriage and worked several jobs just to make ends meet, but they also were able to buy a house of their own while also get out from underneath this awful landlord. And when they tried to sue them illegitimately, they went right back at them and put them right in their place. Like, this really was awesome to see. That landlord was a piece of garbage. They were trying to sue this person for stuff that they didn't even do to the house. That sounds like such a nightmare, to be blamed for something that you had no control over. Like, you didn't bust up the house. You treated that place with respect. You did everything correctly, and there's no reason for you to be treated that way. So good for you for getting back at this entitled landlord. They seriously had it coming, and the way you took them down was seriously awesome to see. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled manager makes me stay later than I'm allowed to, stating that I have to get everything done and that I can't leave until everything else is done. So I decide to maliciously comply, and as a result, she eventually got fired. Here's what happened. So this happened a couple of years ago in December of 2019. I got a job at a higher end grocery store in the area, as I was planning on saving for when I started college in fall of 2020. The store has all kinds of different departments, from the market cafe to the pizza and sub shop to the cheese section, etc. I aced my interview and I was hired in the bakery department, specifically for breads only. That will be important later. The first 4 months was a breeze, but after COVID-19 ramped up, my doctor put me on leave until August. When I returned, a lot of people had already quit the bakery. I was taking college classes now, so I was working night shift part-time from 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock. My department manager by the name of Sarah informed me that they were short-staffed on nights and I might be on my own 1 day a week. I was sure I would be getting help for the rest of the nights, but nope, that didn't happen. Weeks go by and I barely get any help. I'm burning myself doing closing shift on my own, along with my own schoolwork. No one was in the dessert or breakfast section, and I can't talk to anyone about it because they're gone by the time I clock in. I complained to the bread manager by the name of John, and he told me that he will talk to Sarah since she runs the whole department. So I thought, okay, fine, go ahead and do that. And this is how the conversation went with Sarah. I said to her, hey, I wanted to talk to you about the workload. A lot of day shift people leave their mess and can't clean up after themselves. I have to do that and my duties, which isn't fair. Are you hiring anybody else for the night shift? I can't keep running around, and I'm using my inhaler so much too. Sarah says, oh yeah, we're having a hard time filling the night shift roles. We could always train you for desserts and breakfast. I say to her, that's not what I meant. I meant assistance, not more responsibility. I can't do everything in the bakery and close with only 4 hours. Sarah said, well, you can just figure something out. Just make sure you don't leave a mess during closing though. You can't leave until everyone else is done. I can't leave until everyone else is done? Okay. Ever since she said that, I started documenting every time I had to do 3 jobs at once. I would take my sweet time when I didn't have class the next day, making sure I clocked out at 11 o'clock each time. The amount of stuff that kept piling up was ridiculous, but I was simply following her instructions. Human Resources noticed my clock in and clock out times and wanted me to come by their office. I told them everything, along with photos I took. Suddenly, everything changed. At 9 o'clock sharp, they were kicking me out, and whatever was left was for the morning. And eventually, this all fell on Sarah. Now, Sarah was reprimanded, but wasn't fired until she was caught selling 2-year-old expired pumpkin pies. And this was all to customers on Thanksgiving Day. That day surely was a doozy, and while I was shocked, I honestly was not surprised. Yeah, the manager in that situation sounds like a complete loser. Like, first off, you're making a part part-time worker pick up all this slack, and this is all without extra pay or extra hours. Like seriously, I cannot stand managers who do that. They push everything on somebody else, and then they try to walk away scot-free, as if they don't have any kind of responsibilities at the place they work at. But you know what? It sounds like Sarah got exactly what she deserved in the end, because she was an awful manager, and the fact that she would try and force this on the original poster is proof enough that she had no business being in a manager position. My boyfriend struggles to give me compliments because he's fearful that I'll leave him if I feel too good about myself, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. For context, we've been together for almost 2 years. I've struggled with low self-esteem my whole life, and it's gotten worse recently. I am currently working on it in therapy. I did some research online, and I found out lots of people struggle with a lack of compliments in relationships, but I haven't seen a post about this particular reason. Throughout our relationship, he's never really complimented me. It's easy for him to compliment his friends or female friends. He would even call them beautiful, but he's told me multiple times that he struggles with complimenting me because he thinks that if I have high self-esteem and think I'm awesome and beautiful, I will just straight up leave him. He also explained to me how compliments were not a big part of his 6-year relationship, which took up most of his young adult life. It was very unhealthy, and she ended up cheating on him. He has a huge abandonment wound from this, understandably, because that was so awful. He knows that I struggle with low self-esteem pretty badly, and when I express to him times where I'm feeling insecure, he's very supportive and reassuring about it, giving me general "I love you, you're beautiful" statements, and I really do appreciate that. We had a talk last night, and he left me a note this morning saying that he finds me so beautiful, and I thought that was really sweet. Since we've talked about it recently and a while ago, he has been complimenting me more, but it honestly feels forced and not genuine to me sometimes, like he's uncomfortable saying it and feels like he has to do it. But still, I really appreciate him trying. I compliment him pretty often because it comes off naturally to me, which is why it's hard for me to understand how if you're genuinely in love with someone, you wouldn't be gushing over them, at least sometimes. We talked about how I'd really love for him to vocalize how he feels more often, and how not hearing those things has been really hard and had an impact on my self-esteem in the context of our relationship. It's just extra hard because of the way he could compliment his female best friend. He says this is because he's not scared of a friend leaving him, but a relationship is an entirely different entity. I understand that the thought of abandonment is such a huge fear, and at the same time, I'm just struggling with the fact that it's kind of hurtful because it seems like he doesn't want to feel good about himself in a way because of that fear. He knows it sounds awful too and feels bad about it, so I don't want to bring it up. It's just become a bit painful because he's seen how heavily I'm struggling with self-esteem, and that statement makes it sound like he does not want me to get better and feel good about myself. Otherwise, I would just leave him. I'm not sure if that's the truth, or just an excuse because he doesn't find me attractive or something like that, or he just isn't used to complimenting people. He's actively working on complimenting me more, but it doesn't feel specific or genuine at times, and I'm not sure how to address this idea. I just want to feel reassured that the person I'm wanting to continue building a life with thinks nice things about me and wants me to feel good about myself. What can I do to work through this with him, especially with this being a huge fear of his? What should I do? First off, I think you need to start taking the compliments for face value. I think it's really inappropriate to read too much into it and be like, yeah, you're saying it, but do you mean it? Like, first off, he's obviously never done this before. He has literally no practice at it, and maybe this is the first big step for him to start complimenting you more. So honestly, if he's complimenting you, I think it's really important for you to believe him, because not believing him honestly sounds obnoxious, and that would get really old really fast. But in that same vein of thought, this guy really doesn't want you to feel good about yourself. Like, seriously, how can you not see that as a red flag? What boyfriend in their right mind would say to you, well, if you feel too good about yourself, you're just gonna leave me? Like, that's honestly insane, and it sounds like he needs to go to therapy or something like that, because that does not sound like a healthy relationship in the slightest. So hopefully something positive can come from this relationship, because from the sounds of it, this does not sound healthy in the slightest, and hopefully things can get worked out sooner than later. My entitled brother and sister-in-law are intentionally ruining their daughter's financial future by taking out student loans in her name and spending it frivolously on cars and other things, and I'm honestly not sure what to do. Here's what happened. My brother and sister are extremely irresponsible with money to the point where they have already been bankrupt twice, and they are working on number 3 right now. It just hasn't been enough years yet since the last time. They both owe over $150,000 in student loans, as well as credit cards. Plus, they owe more on their home than it's worth because they take out every cent of equity they gain immediately, saying they are going to pay off debt with it, but blow it on more impulsive luxury buys. They have 3 children. The oldest is 18 and in college. I just found out that they took out massive student loans in the kid's name exclusively, way beyond what was necessary, and they blew it on themselves. They already scammed the kid out of a life savings last summer, buying her a car, but they pulled a switch on her by purchasing a manual transmission that she doesn't know how to drive. I know they did it on purpose because my brother wanted the new car for himself and said it was a fair trade to give her the old beat-up ugly minivan instead, but didn't give her the money she put up for the new car back. The in-laws set up a college fund for her as a small child, and every holiday, instead of gifts, money was put into that account. When it came time to use the money, she discovered it was all gone. They spent it all behind her back, and she had no idea until she needed it and found out. I just found out that they got her deep into student loan debt, way beyond what she needed, and she hasn't even started her second year yet. They thought Biden was going to forgive the $20,000, so they went and blew through it thinking that it was free money. This poor kid has no idea the magnitude of what they have done to her long term. They screwed up their own lives and finances beyond repair and just couldn't resist taking advantage of their own kid by putting her deep in the hole where she will never be able to pay it off or will be trying for the rest of her life. The career path she is pursuing is not a high-earning job, so she is already going to struggle supporting herself on her own after college. I don't think she knows how much debt is being racked up in her name, and if she decides to quit school or choose another path, she will be stuck with a huge payment regardless. Tuition is super cheap as she stayed in state, so they could have easily paid out of pocket and avoided putting her into the same situation they are in. I am disgusted at the level of entitlement that they have to literally rob their own children out of every cent she had, which wasn't much to begin with, then proceeded to sentence her to massive debt on top of it for life, just so they can keep spending frivolously on everything, from eating out every meal, to new tech gadgets, to taking trips and then having 2 cars for themselves, as well as clothes and home decor. They also owe my parents tens of thousands of dollars for all the bailouts to save their house from foreclosure, which has happened several times. It would take all day to go over all the rotten, greedy, entitled things they do, but screwing over your own kid is next level. And the worst part about it is they have 2 other kids that they can easily take advantage of. I have discussed this with my elderly parents who are owed the tens of thousands of dollars, and they haven't seen a penny. They paid the down payment on their house, and they bailed them out several times, paying for their mortgage payments just so they wouldn't get foreclosed. Honestly, it's only a matter of time before they start taking out credit cards in their kids' names, or who knows what. This is all just so entirely awful, and I seriously don't know what to do. Honestly, this is actually insane, because it really does sound like these parents are committing identity theft. Like they are straight up stealing their daughter's identity and using the student loans to buy whatever they want. Like that is insane to me. I mean, at one point they were even thinking, oh, the president's gonna forgive $20,000. This is just free money, let's go for it. Meanwhile, this kid has literally no idea the mountain of debt they're gonna have to deal with. It's probably gonna be twice as much as what they would normally think. Like these parents are seriously messed up. This is really gonna ruin this kid's life, and that's not fair at all. So my first thought is, well, hopefully this kid is aware of what's happening to her. I mean, I really hope she's not going through her college career thinking to herself that nothing nefarious is going on behind the scenes, and hopefully she's aware of what her parents are doing to her. And if not, then man, someone has to tell her, because this is seriously bad. This is so bad, this could very easily end up in a court case. And personally, I would really want her to know that, yeah, your parents are basically ruining your life. I can say for certain if I was in that situation and I knew that my parents were ruining my financial future, I would probably lawyer up. Like there's no way I'm gonna take that sitting down. They're literally giving her tens of thousands of dollars of extra debt. Like college is already expensive enough, but to nearly double that is insane to me. So hopefully everything works out for your niece, because from the sounds of it, her parents are absolutely awful, and she does not deserve the mountain of debt that she is probably going to have to deal with. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. My entitled roommate is a complete slob and chooses to play video games all day every day instead of getting up and getting a job and contributing to the house. And at this point, I'm so frustrated, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So we are both 24 years old, living in a foreign country to save up and build a future. I lived alone, but recently, about 2 weeks back, a close friend lost her job and moved in with me. She said she would be spending her days in the morning applying for jobs while I'm away at work. Ever since she came, she does nothing but play on her PlayStation 5 on my 55-inch TV from 11 a.m. until I come home at around 7 p.m. Then I tell her to let me use the TV as it's my time now, which she gets annoyed and says that she wants to play and finish a certain level. Then if I manage to take the TV and let her shut down the PS5, I use it from around 9 o'clock p.m. until 11 o'clock, and sometimes I don't, depending on if I have other priorities. Then she keeps gaming from 11 p.m. until 4 or 7 a.m., which is honestly all depending on the day. I tried to wake her up today for her interview at 9 o'clock, since, she asked me to do that, but she slept in until 11:10, and her interview was at 11:30, and she was late for it. She keeps acting like a child, like sitting on the couch and asking me to get her stuff from the kitchen or whatever. She never helps with house chores, and she sheds a lot of long hairs on the floor and on the bathroom sink that she never picks up even after I asked her to. Today, I was checking my electricity app just to see the consumption of electricity, and it turns out from June 22nd until today, she used the same power I used the whole month of June, and there is still 2 weeks till the end of the month. My rent is high, I have bills to pay, I've got debt, and all I can see is how she is not helping or pushing me up. She is the kind of person with a bad influence. Another thing that annoys me is that she vapes in the house when I tell her not to. I am not a smoker. I've never smoked and I've hated it my entire life. It feels very disrespectful that she doesn't consider my health boundaries. She smokes while sitting beside me indoors with the windows closed. She never helps with cooking too, and she keeps blaming her ADHD for all the things that she's doing. So now I'm at a loss and I seriously don't know what to do. It's honestly time for your friend to start pulling her weight. Like seriously, she is a leech. She's come into this house and she's racked up all of your bills, and she basically lied to your face, saying that she's gonna look for a job, but in reality, she's just gonna play the PlayStation 5 all day. And she's doing that from like 11 o'clock until 4 in the morning. Like seriously, she needs to get a job. She needs to start contributing to the household, and she needs to have something to do. And no, she can't just blame this on her ADHD. There are plenty of people with ADHD who get a lot of things done in their lives. So the fact that she seriously is gonna try and use that as some kind of crutch or as some kind of excuse is honestly just really dumb. And it's completely just a cop-out. Chances are she probably doesn't have ADHD, and she hasn't been properly prescribed by a doctor, and she's just riding the popular TikTok trend to be like, oh, I'm so lazy, it's because of my ADHD. Like, no, it's time to get up and get to work, because truly at this point, she is just using you. She's not motivated to get a job, and it really seems like she's causing a lot of problems in your life. And frankly, if I was in your shoes, I would tell her straight up, you can either get a job and start paying rent, or you've got to go. I honestly think everything else in this situation can be fixed if she just gets a job. That is, if you even want her as some kind of roommate in the first place. So hopefully this works out for you, because from the sounds of it, she really does not sound like a good roommate, and something needs to change or she has got to go. My former teacher treats me like a trophy every time she sees me, despite the fact that she didn't believe me when I told her some awful things about my childhood. And now as an adult, I seriously don't know what to do. Mrs. Smith was my teacher in 6th grade when I was 11. Mrs. Smith is not her real name. She was my favorite teacher, and she always told me I was her favorite student. And she told me, and weirdly enough, other adults, including other teachers, that she and I had a special relationship, and I had a special place in her heart, and that I was like her own daughter. I usually stayed in at recess and after school to help her with projects. She gave me a lot of responsibility, including letting me mark other kids' tests for her, as well as letting me write down a monthly article in the school newsletter that she was supposed to write herself, and letting me write assembly scripts for her. She gave me her personal cell phone number at the end of 6th grade and told me I should call her in the summer so we could get together, and she always told me I could talk to her about anything. Throughout the following year, we remained close. I still came to her class most days at recess and after school, and she started sometimes pulling me out of my 7th grade classes to have me help her with things that apparently I was the only one who could do it. She constantly told me I was smarter and a better writer than any of the other kids, and she couldn't rely on anyone else for stuff that she was asking of me. She again told me at the end of 7th grade to call her over the summer. The end of 7th grade was very hard for me. My mom and stepdad, who had previously been awful towards me, but had ramped up this awful behavior throughout 7th grade, kicked me out of the house at the end of 7th grade, which resulted in me going to live permanently with my dad. These circumstances were very messy, and they were incredibly devastating for me. And when I started the 8th grade, I was really struggling emotionally. At the beginning of 8th grade, I told Mrs. Smith about my mom and stepdad and how they've been awful to me, and they kicked me out of the house, and how I was stressed about dealing with stuff related to CPS, the police, the courts, etc., and how I was also worried about my brother, who was still living with my mom and stepdad. Mrs. Smith got very angry at me for telling her all this and said I'd put her in a difficult situation because my brother was in her class this year, and by telling her about this stuff that's happening that I had experienced from my mom and stepdad, I would be damaging her relationship with my mom and stepdad, which she would need in order to help my brother. She also told me that she didn't think my mom and stepdad had been that awful to me, and that she had known me for years and had never seen any signs of them being awful, and she was angry at me that she would have to take further mandated action, which basically means she would have to report what I told her, even when she didn't think I was telling the truth. Now, when she said this, I was absolutely devastated by her not believing me, and I tried several more times throughout the school year to get her to understand, but she kept getting angry at me and sometimes yelling at me or telling me things like, "I'm not proud of you when you tell me things like this." Eventually, I stopped trying to get her support, even as multiple events unfolded at the school involving my mom and the police being called. And when I wanted Mrs. Smith's support, she basically told me to get away from her and stay out of it. She was then happy when I stopped trying to get her support and wanted to go back to acting like everything was normal and I wasn't somehow struggling behind the scenes. She still wanted me to come to her class at recess and after school. She continued pulling me out of class to help her with things and stuff like that. I still see Mrs. Smith occasionally because my little sister, who's 9 years old, still goes to that school. Mrs. Smith also still has my phone number and texts me from time to time, particularly when she hears or sees me on the news. I do have a pretty public job overall. She also still likes to talk to other people about me and how much she loves me and how special I am to her. Whenever I see her, she wants to hold my hand and parade me around and tell everyone about all my accomplishments like she is somehow responsible for them. And everyone she talks to in this way is always complimenting my special relationship I have with her. As I get older, I feel less and less comfortable with this dynamic and more angry and confused about how she, as an adult, could have treated me as a 13-year-old so cruelly when I disclosed the details of my awful situation, and then how she spent the intervening 15 years pretending that never happened at all. Part of me wants to cut ties with her altogether and tell her to stop texting me and interacting with me. Another part of me feels like she was such an important person in my life for a long time, and it might be better to have a conversation with her about how I feel about what happened when I was 13. I highly doubt she's going to understand why what she did was wrong, or that she will apologize in the slightest. More than likely, she'll either deny that these things happened the way that I remember them, or she'll blame me and tell me that it was really my fault for lying and telling her stuff like this at all, or better yet, she'll get emotional and start crying and need me to comfort her for what she did. But I do think it might be helpful for me to say my piece and set her straight on what our actual relationship feels like to me. So maybe then she'll stop talking to other people about how close we are and how special I am to her, and at least it might help me to get it off my chest. But I also know she's very conflict avoidant, which is what led to this problem to begin with. So if I text her and say, I'd like to talk about some stuff that happened when I was 13, she is definitely not going to want to talk about it. But if I just say, hey, let's get some coffee, and she says okay, and then I bring this up without warning her, I feel like I might be tricking her or forcing her into a conversation that she would not have consented to if she had known, which might not be fair for her at all. I've thought about writing this stuff down in a text or email or a letter, but I know she probably won't reply to it, and then I'll probably feel very anxious, waiting for some kind of response that probably won't come my way. I don't like being ignored, and I don't like worrying about someone's reaction. What should I do? Honestly, this sounds like an incredibly inappropriate relationship. Like, let me get this straight. This teacher not only knew about the awful situation that you were in with your mom and stepdad, but she also made it a big deal and tried to pretend like this is your fault for telling her about it. She is literally not only an awful teacher, but also an awful human being. Who in their right mind would listen to what a kid is telling them and be like, wow, I can't believe you're putting me in this situation. Like, what are you talking about? You're a mandated reporter. You have an obligation to protect this student. Like, are you really gonna look at me and say, oh man, this is such a bad thing for me specifically? Oh, okay, what about the kid who's telling you all about what they're going through? I'm sure that's a much bigger deal than whatever you're going through mentally. Honestly, if I was in your shoes, and I'm speaking for myself, I absolutely would confront her about this. I would tell her straight up, listen, I don't like you using my name as some kind of bartering chip for your own clout. We are not friends. You were an awful person when I was a child, and you did not listen when my mom and stepdad were being awful to me. So please keep my name out of your mouth. That's what I would say personally. Because in my opinion, if someone's been awful to me, even if I realize it later in life and I'm starting to connect the dots, and that person is trying to use my name to gain favor from other people, that would literally drive me crazy. There's no way I'm gonna be okay with that. Because the fact of the matter is, she literally tried to gaslight you into thinking that this is your fault, that you were just lying and you were putting her in a bad situation. I mean, don't even get me started on the fact that she's like, oh, you should call me over the summer. Meanwhile, you're what, 12, 13 years old? Like, no, that is highly inappropriate. I'm so sorry you dealt with this, and honestly, you do not deserve to be treated this way. But I think whatever you decide to do, from the sounds of it, you have a high-profile public job, and I think you just need to be careful about the way you do handle this. But regardless of whatever happens, whether you just straight up block her and move on with your life, or if you choose to confront her, that's honestly up to you. However you decide to go about doing this, I want to say I'm so sorry you dealt with this, and hopefully things get better for you and your life. My girlfriend puts a limit on what she is willing to do for me as her boyfriend, stating that unless I make her my wife, she is not willing to step up and show me that she cares. And now I'm kind of at a crossroads, and I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. So my girlfriend and I have been dating for about 7 months now. She's a 22-year-old female, and I'm a 23-year-old male. She has brought up a lot of situations where she would not be willing to do things for me because I didn't put a ring on it. That includes making me food, or literally just taking care of me in a certain way, or taking care of me too much. Since we have been together, I have done so much for this girl. I never for 1 second thought of what I would put a limit on in terms of what I would do for my girlfriend, because I never felt like there was a limit as to what you would do for your partner if you really love them. I never thought you needed a title to determine how much or how far you would go for your partner. Since we began dating, I have taken care of this girl by covering her rent for a month because she has not been working. I also bought her a new laptop because she didn't have a laptop for school and she needed one in order to work. And this was a MacBook Pro. This was really expensive. And this would be to help her with her side hustles or just be used for schoolwork. And it was just for straight up necessity. I have also went to Chicago with this girl in January and covered everything, which amounted to just around $2,000 for the whole trip. Since dating, this girl has not spent money on one single date or bought me a single gift except for my birthday, which was prior to me asking her to be my girlfriend. And I never for once asked. I have covered every single date, and I'm pretty sure I've been on over 100 dates at this point. I have bought her gifts for Christmas. I have bought her gifts for Valentine's Day. I have bought her flowers all the time, and whenever she gets them, they just die within a few weeks. I was also just about to plan a $2,000 vacation to the Dominican Republic for her birthday. I will add that since we started dating, she has not been working a consistent job and had to quit her job right before we started talking because she was getting bothered at her job, as her job was mostly full of men. My point being is that I have never put a limit as to what I would do for her, regardless of if she's my wife or not. I love her and I would do anything for her. She did make me breakfast a couple of times months ago, and she all of a sudden switched things up and said that she's not going to do these things unless I put a promise ring on her finger, or at least actually marry her. In a heated argument we had a few days ago, I asked her if she always had this kind of general rule as to what she would do or not do for me if I didn't put a ring on her finger. She then proceeded to tell me that she's only focused on what benefits her in the relationship, and she doesn't ever think about that. So because of the situation, I need to ask the internet, what do you think is the limit of what a man should do for the girlfriend who is not their wife? It could be paying for their bills, spending money on a vacation, as well as visiting them too. What would you put a limit on as to what you would do? Hopefully I can get some answers, because at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Your girlfriend is awful. Can I just say that first and foremost? Like, she is literally in this just to take from you. She hasn't given anything to you. She takes all your money, all of your time, and it still is not good enough. She doesn't reciprocate this in the slightest. Like, I'm even second guessing if she even loves you in the first place. Like, this is not normal. It is not normal for your girlfriend to be like, oh, you want me to care for you? Okay, you better marry me first. First off, that is crazy talk. Also, you two are in your early 20s. She's 22 and you're 23. And yeah, you could definitely get married at that age, but for starters, you've only known her for 7 months, and in those 7 months, she's basically put a wall up and said, I'm not going to do anything for you unless you put a ring on my finger and marry me. Like, is she serious right now? So she's willing to accept all these gifts and presents and all this love from you, but for her to reciprocate, she's going to require you getting married to her? That doesn't sound right in my opinion at all. Honestly, the only thing that's astounding to me is the fact that you're putting up with this. Like, you are literally accepting breadcrumbs from her while effectively bending over backwards just to appeal to your girlfriend, who, by the way, is showing straight up that she's just using you. So if I was in your shoes, I would be reevaluating this relationship. Your girlfriend sounds like an awful piece of work, and it doesn't sound like she cares about you in the slightest. And if I were in your shoes, I would stop taking that as soon as possible. My entitled Karen of a roommate keeps stealing all my food, so I decide to get some revenge by putting vegetables in everything that I make, frustrating her beyond end because she absolutely hates anything green. Here's what happened. So I live in a rented house with a single mother and her son. The single mother is 30 years old and her son is 6 years old. I had another person living with me, but they moved out and the mother moved in. I don't mind living with her and her kid. It's fine, and we kind of do our own thing. I spend a lot of time at my boyfriend's place, or I'm just working. Our work schedules collide, so we really don't interact much, but when we do, it's fine. No issues there. I want to start with saying that she clearly struggles financially, but I don't think it's an excuse. I don't make lots of money either. However, I've noticed that my food would go missing, or portions would be taken from it. I assumed it was her kid, so I asked her if she could have him stop eating my food. I was calm about it, and she just said that she would. It didn't really upset me when it first started. It started getting annoying when I'd get home from work and expect to have a meal's worth of leftovers in the fridge, only to see it then picked through or just straight up gone. I kept bringing it up, and she actually started getting annoyed with me for bringing it up so often. Just from observing them from afar, I realized that neither of them ever ate vegetables, and judging by food that would get picked through and the food that would be untouched, anything with green in it was avoided. Orange chicken would be gone, but chicken and broccoli would be untouched. So, to get back at my roommate and her kid for eating my food all the time, I decided to start putting vegetables in everything. I personally find vegetables to be delicious, and anything green or not a potato does not get eaten. So I could mix some bell peppers into the food and it would be fine. I make a big portion of vegetables pretty frequently anyways, so I just started putting it in everything that I eat. If I had leftover mashed potatoes, I would pour some green beans in and then mix it up. If I had leftover cheesy bacon fries, I'd pour broccoli all over it and then mix it up as well. Usually, my homemade stuff has broccoli in it, but I started making sure that everything did. I made a pot of mac and cheese, which is this stupid kid's favorite meal, by the way, and I poured in roasted Brussels sprouts, which is actually delicious to me, and I'm eating more vegetables, so it's kind of a win-win. She had been annoyed, but we were all home when I made the pot of mac and cheese. She was in the living room and saw me getting out the Brussels sprouts, and she was like, "What are you going to do with that?" And then I poured it into the pot, and that's when she finally said what I was waiting for. She said, "You're being greedy and really annoying." I just said to her, "Well, I like Brussels sprouts." And that was it. She said to me, "We need food." And I told her, "Well, you should probably go get some, or stop buying only prepackaged things, and your money will probably go farther." I think she sees this as some kind of big act of revenge, but I simply just want to be able to eat my food without her or her stupid kid eating any of it. Also, I want to add that sharing is not an issue. The real issue is expecting to have food there and it not being there. So often I would be gone for a long day, and I would get home expecting to have a meal's worth of food, just for it all to be picked away and gone in a flash. Or I wake up in a rush and I have my food ready to eat in the morning, only to find out that it's gone again. So now I have to skip breakfast, all because they wanted to be selfish. If she would simply text me sometimes and say, "Hey, is it okay if we eat this food item in the fridge?" I would know and know to make other plans. I would stop for food or know I have to whip something up when I get home. Also, I think eating the last of someone else's food is crazy and rude. If someone makes a big pot of something and you ask for a serving, then that's one thing. But if someone made something and there is one serving left and you eat it without permission, then that, in my opinion, is incredibly evil. Honestly, this is such a funny way of getting revenge at your roommate. And let's be honest, this absolutely is revenge. She was clearly taking all of your food and either giving it to her kid or at least using her kid as some kind of shield to try and block herself from any kind of guilt associated with this. And that is honestly so ridiculous. She was being super entitled about this as well. The second she saw those Brussels sprouts getting mixed in, she freaked out and said, "Oh wow, you're being rude and selfish. You're being so greedy and annoying. Like, lady, if you want food of your own, then you should probably go to the store and get it yourself. Why am I, as your roommate, responsible for feeding you and your kid? Like, this wouldn't be an issue if she would simply stop stealing this person's food. So good for you for stuffing vegetables and everything that you enjoy. It clearly is working and getting a message across to this lady, and hopefully in the future she will stop stealing food from you and will instead just buy her own stuff. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Am I the jerk for not canceling plans when my stepdaughter got sick? Here's what happened. So I've been with my husband John for 5 years now. He has a daughter by the name of Sarah, and Sarah and I are very close, and she's gotten to be good friends with my sister's daughter by the name of Molly. Molly and Sarah are not their real names. There was a large festival type event in our town last weekend. Sarah is the one who originally saw the ad for the event a few weeks ago, and she got Molly excited about it, so the two of them asked if I would take them to see it. It looked like a lot of fun, so I told them that I would be happy to go with them. Well, Sarah came down with an illness while at her mom's house last weekend and was still unwell the day of the festival, so she stayed home with her mother. My niece still wanted to go, so we did, and we had a great time together. We got Sarah a few little presents, and we really did miss her, but I didn't see any reason for Molly to miss out. Sarah was back in school on Monday, and Molly had brought her gifts in to give to Sarah. Sarah had not realized that we had still attended without her and got very upset when Molly tried to tell her about the event. She said it was her idea and that we weren't supposed to go without her. She called her dad after school and told him that what we had done was unfair, and we basically stole her plans and had fun without her. Now, I understand the mentality of an 11-year-old, but I was absolutely shocked that my husband came home and picked an argument with me about it. First off, he knew that Molly and I still went to the event, and he said nothing about it. And secondly, it is unfair that Sarah caught a bug, but Molly did nothing wrong, and I'm free to spend my time with my niece if I choose to. John insisted that I should prioritize Sarah's feelings because stepmother is a chosen commitment that's greater than niece, but I still don't see it that way in the slightest. I love them both, and sometimes life is just unfair. John has been very irritated with me all week, and now I'm beginning to wonder if it's valid the way that I'm thinking. So what do you think? Am I the jerk for not canceling plans when my stepdaughter got sick? First and foremost, Sarah is a child. Why is your husband playing to this child and basically giving in to her main character syndrome? Like, I'm sorry you got sick, but there's no reason not to go to the event and not try and enjoy ourselves. It's not like they went to the event in spite of Sarah. They went to try and enjoy themselves and have a good time, and they brought gifts back as some kind of way of saying, hey, I'm sorry you got sick, but here's some gifts to try and make up for it. And if you want to try and make it up, just go to a new trip or something. Go find another event that this stepdaughter might enjoy, and then plan on going there and make sure she doesn't get sick. Like, honestly, it sounds like the husband is really enabling this bratty behavior, because legitimately the world does not revolve around you. And that's a very powerful life lesson that this kid clearly needs to learn. It's not okay to get really upset when other people do stuff that you planned on doing but couldn't do because you got sick. So no, I don't think you're the jerk at all. I think there's nothing wrong with you going on this trip, and I think the way that your stepdaughter is acting is incredibly bratty. Am I the jerk for not letting my husband's sister come to the lake this year? All because she drinks too much and ends up in the ER if she's not careful. Here's what happened. My husband's job means that 4th of July is one of the busiest days of the year, so we've developed a bit of a tradition where we invite a bunch of family and friends to our lake house the weekend after the 4th. Eventually though, this has swelled up to be about 30 people. A lot of our friends use it as an excuse to leave their kids behind for a weekend, and there's a lot of partying involved. For the past 2 years, my sister-in-law's behavior has been a major issue at these events. She completely loses control when drinking. I don't think I can list the things that have happened here, but one such instance involved a very scary trip to the ER. My husband and I have had so many talks that she needs treatment, but she and his parents are in denial. After last year, we told her that she can only come to the lake house if she promises to remain sober over the weekend. She threw a fit about it, we stood firm, but the topic was dropped. Yesterday, my husband called her to remind her of what we had said, and she absolutely lost her mind. She thinks I'm trying to ban her because I don't like her. Honestly though, I really do like her, at least when she's not drinking, that is. My husband said that he will be sober over the weekend too, because he knows it can be hard to be the only person not drinking, but she didn't budge. Eventually, he said if she can't commit to not drinking, then she can't come. Now, her aunt and cousin have gotten involved. They messaged me and said to let her come along, and they'll watch her the whole weekend to make sure that she's okay. But I said no dice. When they started trying to say I was bullying her, this is a 30-year-old woman too, by the way, and that she's had such a hard time recently, and she can't be the only one in the family not invited, it would break her heart. I said to them she is invited. She just can't be drinking because it's not safe. They said that's not not fair to her. And if she can't drink, then no one should be. And I said no, but if they wanted to plan a sober weekend next month, that might actually be a good idea. They brushed off the idea because they're not actually interested in a sober weekend. Now my husband's parents are getting involved, and it's turning into this huge drama. We are all set up to start arriving tonight, and all of this is going on. So are we the jerk for refusing to let my husband's sister come to our lake this year if she's gonna be drinking? No, you are not the jerk in the slightest. Your sister has a problem. She takes things too far, and it only adds up for problems for you and your husband. And by the way, this is your lake house. So guess what? Your rules go above anybody else. And it's also really funny that you're the one getting the blunt end of everybody's judgment. Like, this is a joint decision. So your husband, in my opinion, needs to make it very clear with his family that he's just as much involved in this decision as you are. It is completely unacceptable and so rude that the entire family is trying to blame you and hassle only you about it. And also, what is this weird mentality of, oh, if she can't drink, no one should be able to? I'm sorry, but no one else has gone to the ER, as well as had other sketchy things happen because they get drunk. It kind of seems like it's only the sister that's been able to do that. So that in and of itself is more than enough reason for these people to be like, no, you're not drinking if you're gonna show up. So no, you and your husband are not the jerks. You did not do anything wrong, and if anything, your extended family are absolutely jerks for trying to enable this sister into drinking more and possibly ending up in the ER once again. An entitled jerk keeps running over my traffic cones at my work site, so I decide to get some revenge by filling up one of the traffic cones with cement just to leave for him to run over and then damage his car. Here's what happened. So to start things out, I work on trees, and sometimes I have to do blocks and blocks of trees near the street, and when this happens, I put up all the correct signage, which is usually something along the lines of stating that there's men in the trees, and a few lanes are going to be closed ahead. My crew works pretty fast and pretty safe. Well, every day when we would take lunch, we would sit under a tree eating our lunch. It's much faster and efficient for us to just leave the work zone up while we are eating. Well, one day this jerk decided it would be funny to start running over our cones in the taper, and that's the row of cones that starts from the curb and goes to an angle to try and force people into one lane. This started on a Monday, and every single day, this jerk would try and come by and run over our cones and just straight up laugh at us while we are all sitting down taking our lunch. So one of us would have to walk a few blocks to go retrieve the cones, and it basically messed up our lunch and our work zone. Well, come Wednesday, I had had enough. I went to my local hardware store and I bought a few 80-pound bags of quick cement and some really good spray foam. I took 2 of the cones home, filled the top 2 inches of the cones with the foam, and went and had a beer while it dried. Then I proceeded to mix up the quick cement into the cones, and I let it sit overnight. The next morning, I realized that I mixed it too wet and it would have to dry another day. And honestly, I was kind of upset thinking that I would miss my revenge. But sure enough, this jerk came back. So Friday, I take the cones to work and I set up the work zone. The first 2 cones are normal, and then the 2 concrete-filled cones are next. Lunchtime comes around and this jerk drives by and the whole crew is watching. He notices this and gets going extra fast, knowing that he has our attention. The first 2 cones go down just like normal, and then he hits the first concrete cone. It dents his bumper pretty good, goes under the tire, then gets stuck in the wheel well, but soon falls out about the time that he goes over the second cone. It hits his car, smashes up the bumper, and he drives over it. He speeds off pretty quickly, most likely thinking, what in the world just happened? He was in such a hurry he didn't notice his oil pan had also just got ripped off. So hopefully that guy enjoys his locked up engine. That is honestly pretty brave considering the fact that you probably could have been fired for doing that. Like, first and foremost, this guy should not have been running over your cones. That is seriously so dangerous, and that guy really could have hurt somebody. But also the fact that you filled one of them up with cement and put it out there thinking, okay, let's do this. Like, that guy could have really gotten hurt, or it could have gotten you guys hurt. So while I don't think that was a good idea, and I definitely don't condone that kind of action, it is really funny the fact that this guy got put in his place in a serious way. I mean, this guy was being super dangerous. Running over cones at a work site, that is seriously not okay. Like, those cones are there to protect the workers, and guess what? They have every right to sit there and eat their lunch just as much as you do. So good for you for getting revenge, even if what you did is a little bit sketchy. And I'm sure this is a lesson that guy will not soon forget. Am I the jerk for canceling my daughter's 16th birthday party after warning her about the way she acted almost a year ago at her previous birthday party? Here's what happened. For my daughter's 15th birthday, my spouse and I paid for her to take some of her friends out to a restaurant for dinner. During this dinner and party, my daughter got into an argument with one of her friends. Apparently, my daughter was upset that this friend gave her a cheap gift and bought it from a thrift store. According to her best friend, who told us about what had happened, my daughter seemed to like the gift at first and asked her friend where she bought it from. When the girl admitted that it was from a thrift store, that is when my daughter lost it and called her all kinds of names like cheap, beggar, and all this other stuff. Now, it is well known that this friend's family is not well off, but I know that she is a sweet girl who did her very best to get my daughter a gift with her meager allowance. My spouse and I confronted our daughter about it, and she admitted that she had insulted her friend. She went on to insult her further by saying things like, "This is probably the only way she gets to eat at a restaurant, so she should be grateful and give a decent gift." Now, I don't know where my daughter learned such entitlement, but she did not learn it from home. Even her best friend was uncomfortable by her behavior. We immediately took away all of her gifts and donated them. We also told her that unless she apologizes to this girl in front of everyone who was present at the party, we will not be sponsoring any more of her birthdays. My daughter never apologized, and over time, the girl drifted apart from the friend group. Fast forward, and my daughter's 16th birthday is coming up next month, and she has started talking about what kind of party she wants. I reminded her of our promise that we would not fund any more birthday parties until she apologized for her behavior at her previous party. My daughter is saying that it's been a year, and the girl is no longer her friend anyways. She said her best friend is getting a sweet 16 party, which is not a thing in my culture, and how will it look if she doesn't get one as well? But we told her that she still has a month to apologize, but she is not planning to do it because she thinks that we'll cave. My in-laws are now offering to pay for her party, but we have forbidden them from doing that. My daughter and both sets of grandparents are telling us that we are both being too harsh and we are ruining her social life. So what do you think? Are we being the jerk for deciding not to have a birthday party after the way my daughter acted at her last one? What should we do? I do not blame you in the slightest for not having a birthday party. Your daughter was being incredibly entitled. The fact that she would act that way and basically talk down to her friend, or at least former friend in this case, and mock her for getting something from a thrift store is honestly ridiculous. There is no reason for that, and if anything, she absolutely should apologize. This is unacceptable behavior. You don't treat people like that and expect to get away with it. And honestly, you are good parents by teaching this lesson to your daughter. She needs to learn that you need to respect those around you. You need to be grateful for the gifts that you do receive, and you shouldn't talk down to somebody and call them cheap or a beggar just because they didn't get you a gift that was expensive. That would be an awful precedent to set up for them later in life, and honestly, it's just so rude overall. And when it comes to the in-laws saying that they'll pay for her sweet 16, they need to stay out of this business completely. I would personally tell them to buzz off and not get involved in anything like this ever again, because that's seriously inappropriate, and they're overstepping their lines as just in-laws. So good for you for sticking to your morals as a couple and saying to your daughter, no, you need to either apologize or no parties are going to get sponsored by us, because in my opinion, that is absolutely the right thing to do. A table of 3 walks out on their tab, but one of them forgets their purse. So as a result, we decided to get some revenge, and we get them back in a spectacular way. Here's what happened. I first off want to say that this was a wild one today, and I feel obligated to share this with the internet. I work in a casual corporate sit-down restaurant. There was a table of 3 young women today, a mom and 2 daughters, I believe, seated in the bar area today for lunch. Immediately, our bartender waiting on them commented about their bad attitude, excessive questions and requests, and all around just making this a miserable experience for everybody. You all know the kind of table that I'm talking about. Fast forward 45 minutes or so, and they have left without paying their $80 check. Now she's upset, and it's just the kind of kick in the pants to all of us, because it honestly happens far too often at our location. So 5 minutes later, as she is cleaning the table, right then she has her retribution. She finds a small purse and returns it to the manager. Now this is where things get really interesting. The bartender and manager immediately begin tearing through the purse like wild dogs, as if they had just found a fresh carcass. I suppose the justification is to look for some sort of ID, which is fair enough, but they didn't find that. There was a bank envelope with $120, of which they took $80 to pay for the check and returned the rest into the envelope. The bartender also found a bag full of the herb, if you know what I mean, and they just took that as their tip. Now, of course, the young thieving dine and dasher needs to reclaim her purse, so she returns within the hour. She asks to speak with a manager, who returns her purse minus the cash for their check, as well as her precious herb that was in a bag. He greets her by saying, "So you walked out on your check, right?" She proceeds to complain about the service and all this other stuff. He informs her that we settled her check with the cash from her purse, and to her protest, he responds by saying, "What did you think was gonna happen?" Eventually, she leaves. But here's where things become even more slightly interesting. Within a couple of minutes, which is about the time it took to get to the car, discover that her precious herb is missing, the three return in force and demand to speak to the manager again. They claim that something else was missing from her purse. He says to her, "Well, I don't know what to tell you," and they threaten to call the police. Yes, they wanted to report their missing illegal herb. You probably know what I'm referring to at this point. But eventually, they thought better of it, as the manager continued to stonewall them, and they left in a huff. Now, perhaps this was not the most ethical way of handling the situation, but boy was it satisfying. It almost made it all worth it to see some semblance of at least some justice served. And also, it's a nice way to know that they'll never be returning anytime soon. That is honestly the funniest thing I've heard all day. Not only do they take money out of their purse to pay for all of the stuff that they didn't pay for, but they also took their extra oregano that they bought at the store as a weird kind of tip for the bartender. I mean, honestly, everybody in this story has questionable values. I mean, if I was in their shoes and I wanted to be really petty to the people that just dined and dashed, and I saw that item in their purse, I wouldn't take it out as a tip. I would instead call the police and be like, "Hey, someone ran out on their check, and when we found their purse, they had this in their purse." And then I would have happily let them get in trouble for having that in the first place. But either way, good for you for getting revenge, even if that revenge was kinda sketchy in the first place. My entitled boss pretended to have COVID for 8 weeks just so he could go on a reality TV show. But when I found out, I decided to get revenge. So I set up a virtual watch party with my entire company, exposing him for the liar that he is. And as a result, he ended up getting fired. Here's what happened. So mid-pandemic, my boss disappeared. Just as we were gearing up for our most challenging, time-intensive project in the last 5 years, he dropped off the face of the earth. We kept working for a week or so without him because everything was virtual, and the virtual work world was still so new. We didn't really need him, to be honest. We were delegating tasks ourselves and completing things on our own. We spoke to coworkers maybe twice a week, but some decisions were beyond our discretion, so we could not move forward on those aspects of the project until we received a response from him. After about 10 days of complete silence, we finally called our boss's boss, who informed our team that our boss had COVID, so he wasn't able to work right now. We took that at face value, of course, and we sent him letters of well wishes and didn't bother him with work stuff, or ask why he was able to notify his boss but not his team. Nonetheless, 3 weeks go by and still not a word. We are beginning to discuss amongst ourselves whether or not maybe he's passed away. We're terrified and horrified and so concerned. We're contemplating calling his extended family. We're sending flowers and care packages to his apartment, and meanwhile, the project has descended into chaos because no leader was appointed in our boss's stead. So we are forced to navigate several layers of bureaucracy in order to accomplish most anything at all. Whereas in the past, he would have just signed off on it in real time. Around week 4 or 5, one of our coworkers suggested that he doesn't really have COVID, but is instead using it as an excuse to take time off. We all jump all over our coworker, asking how he could insinuate something like that, and lamenting about what a tragedy our boss is probably living through. People were really cold with him after that for a few days. Week 7 rolls around, and we are undertaking a letter writing campaign to upper management, demanding that an acting boss be appointed while ours is still recovering. The project is a month behind schedule. We were all working overtime every single day, and sometimes we were working on the weekends, all without extra compensation. And we were doing this just to keep up with the absolute nightmare of the boss's sudden absence. Week 8 rolls around and he finally reappears, logging into a morning meeting as though nothing had happened. He looks well rested, well fed, and he has a tan. Not at all like someone who's just come out of the other side of a 6-week respiratory virus. And right about at this moment is where things really pop off in a way that I seriously never expected. Our boss goes on to say something like, "Yeah, that was brutal. I'm just glad to be better and I'm glad to be back. Let's get back to work." But when we ask him, he doesn't want to talk about what happened or even answer any of our questions. Not even answering what it was like or if he was in the hospital. Fast forward to about 4 or 5 months after this, and my sister sends me a promo of a fairly new reality TV show. She then says to me, "Isn't this a guy friend of yours or something? I swear I've seen him and you together." I watched the trailer for the show, and lo and behold, there's my boss, participating as a contestant on a reality TV show. It did not take long for me to put the pieces together and realize that he took an extended leave to go on television and just straight up lied about it under the guise of a vicious disease that nearly all of us had lost a loved one to. And he did this because he knew he would never get the time off, especially when we're in the middle of this massive project. After watching this, I sit and stew with this information, unsure of how to handle it. I know confronting him won't get me very far, but I can't just do nothing, right? I'm not close enough with any of my colleagues to discuss this with them and trust that they wouldn't run off and send an all-company email about it. So I slept on it for a few nights, and then the opportunity fell right in my lap. I got an email from corporate encouraging teams still working remotely to plan virtual social functions to keep colleague culture going and to stay in touch. Among the suggestions were game night, trivia night, and a watch party. With the premiere of the show only a couple weeks away, I got busy telling everyone how I'd been meaning to get into the show, and it's so enticing and exciting, basically laying the groundwork to guilt them into coming to an impromptu virtual watch party off hours. I offered to get special shirts made up and send them to each person's house, whatever I had to do to get the attention of corporate. Finally, I sent a digital invite to all of my boss's bosses and any other members of corporate that I could justify inviting without making a total idiot of myself. Because this is entirely virtual, my boss is unable to overhear any of the chatter. He doesn't realize I'm hyping up the show, and he doesn't realize I've planned a watch party for it specifically. I wasn't inviting him unless he had the guts to explicitly ask about it. I was hoping that he wouldn't have heard about it at all, not until afterwards at least. That was really the only way that this could work. The night comes and I am screen sharing the show to a whopping 64 people, which is a huge chunk of my department. Many members of corporate had shown up because I was the only person stupid enough to buy into their virtual social work party scheme, so they felt pressure to come and support it. I was holding my breath, hoping this would go my way, bracing myself for some kind of curveball, but there wasn't even that dramatic of a build-up. Right at the onset, they introduced the premise, which included the contestants being in a COVID-safe bubble in an exotic location, and gave a brief overview of each contestant. As my boss was introduced, right down to what he did for work, and I could see people register delight and surprise. Then they just went blank, just before sliding into confusion and rage. The chat took a drastic turn from "oh my goodness" all the way up until a member of the team typed out, "wait a second, when was this filmed?" My audience dropped from 64 to 58 all the way down to the mid-30s, and by the time the episode was over, it was just me and the other 15 core members of the team. One asked if I'd already known, but some members of the team are very close to the boss, so all I said was, "well, I definitely do now," and I wrapped up the call pretty quickly after that. Perhaps one of the bonuses is that you could already tell from one episode that the character arc the show assigned to our boss was the bumbling idiot. He had his true colors on full display and some production massaging up that to the 11th degree. Well, wouldn't you guess it, my boss was fired. My good buddy was promoted to his place, and I am now an office legend, especially since no one is 100% sure whether or not it was intentional. And it was all so satisfying that it was almost worth the dozens of hours of uncompensated overtime that finally led to this moment. Wow, that boss is a complete idiot. Seriously, if you want to be on a reality TV show, it is definitely not a good idea to pretend like you've got COVID. This guy took 8 weeks off of work just to go to some stupid island or whatever he's doing and participate in reality TV. Like, seriously, was it worth your job, buddy? What a stupid move to do. And it doesn't help either that production's like, alright, we're gonna make this guy look like the bumbling idiot. Like, was it worth it, buddy? Was it worth having your reputation tarnished, as well as losing your job, just so you can go on this stupid reality TV show? Like, honestly, I'm all about people taking time to do what they love, as well as to pursue their dreams. Like, go for it. But lying about having COVID just to take time off to do this stupid TV show, that in my opinion is incredibly unethical. Like, that is seriously messed up, and you absolutely had this coming. Like, what did you think was gonna happen? Did this guy seriously think that no one was gonna watch this show from his department? Did he really think that his bosses were not gonna find out about this? Like, this guy seriously did not think this through in the slightest. So good for the original poster for exposing their boss for the fraud that they were being. Because abandoning your team for 8 weeks just to go on some dumb reality TV show was seriously a stupid idea, and this guy absolutely deserved to get fired. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. A professor is forced to speak at a school event against his will, breaking a 30-year-long streak of never having to speak at any of these events. events. So instead of giving a 10 to 15 minute speech, this professor decides to maliciously comply and keeps everyone there for well over an hour and a half, just to spite the dean that forced him to do it in the first place. Here's what happened. Back when I was in high school, whenever an important date approached, like Independence Day or Memorial Day, we would line up in the courtyard and we would have to be standing still as in formation, and one of the teachers would do a speech about the date and the importance of it. Those speeches were about 10 to 15 minutes long, and the teacher doing the speech would rotate amongst all the faculty. And since there were quite a few teachers, each teacher was due around once a year or less than that. There was one notable omission on the teacher's roster. The mechanography teacher never did a speech. Absolutely never. Let's call him Mark. Mark is not his real name. He would always refuse and get away with it for whatever reason. In around 30 or so years of teaching at the school, it became pretty famous that he never did a speech. That is, until this one day when I guess the dean just got out of bed on the wrong foot or whatever, and he absolutely demanded that Mark is gonna give a speech. There was no way to get away from it. Mark would have to do it. His first speech in 30 years or so at the school. Even some of the faculty, former students of Mark themselves, were excited to see the outcome of this power struggle between Mark and the dean. So we all lined up at the courtyard, 150 students, 15 to 20 teachers, etc., and Mark took the stand and the mic with definitely a smirk of malicious compliance on his face. And then he delivered. He went on for more than 45 minutes of an absolutely drowsing speech, telling every single minute detail and every single fact about the date in question. For the students, it was absolute destruction, having to stand still and silent for almost an hour, all while trying not to fall asleep on our feet. And if we weren't quiet, we would then be punished. The dean tried to stop Mark twice. The first time, Mark just completely ignored the dean. The second time, Mark just plainly told the dean, "You wanted me to do the speech, you're gonna have to deal with it." And he said this for the whole audience to hear. About 30 to 35 minutes later, some of the older students who simply didn't care anymore started shouting things at Mark. Nothing hurtful, but colorful commentaries about the speech. We all started laughing, but Mark carried on as if nothing happened. The dean tried to take the stand to demand silence, but Mark denied the dean, saying, "I'm not finished yet." That day, we lost probably an hour and a half of teaching time. We ended up hating Mark for the torture he put us through. When he finished, the dean had no choice but to give us a short, unscheduled break before returning to our classes. Over the years, I've realized what an absolute masterpiece of malicious compliance Mark delivered. And trust me when I say this, Mark never gave a speech at that school ever again. That is honestly awesome. Mark is my absolute hero. I mean, seriously, this guy just wanted to watch the world burn. He was like, "Oh, okay, you want me to give a speech, huh? Prepare for the longest speech you've ever heard in your life, especially for students. An hour and a half. Like, seriously, think about that for a second. Imagine it's like Columbus Day, and this teacher's going on for an hour and a half about all the details of Columbus Day. I mean, after 15 minutes, this would have gotten old really quick. But having to sit there for another hour and 15 and endure this level of malicious compliance is honestly hilarious to me. I mean, talk about getting back at your boss and saying, "Oh, okay, you want me to talk? Let's talk forever." And I bet this professor could have gone a lot longer as well. I'm sure he could have gone on for at least another hour, but instead decided to probably just cut it short as he felt like his message was getting across. That being that no, you're never gonna ask me to give a speech ever again. So seriously, good for Mark. This guy's awesome. He put the entire administrative staff in their place. And hopefully for their sake, as well as the sake of anybody else that would have to listen, Mark will never be asked to give a speech ever again. My sister-in-law is secretly swiping some of my makeup and putting it in her own containers. And I'm so baffled by her decision to steal from me, I now seriously don't know what to do. So to start things off, I've always been an avid makeup lover, and I take pride in curating my collection. It's my creative outlet and a way to boost my self-confidence. However, over the last few weeks, I noticed that some of my favorite products were getting like half in quantity, and this was all out of nowhere. At first, I shrugged it off as me being merely absent-minded, but last night proved me wrong. Our house is under construction, so my sister-in-law usually uses my washroom. She has kept her little makeup bag there too on a side shelf, which is completely okay to me, since I keep my makeup bag in my washroom too to just retouch my makeup sometimes. Now, last night, I noticed her makeup bag was a bit open and was laying really close to the sink, so I decided to zip it up and put it on the side shelf so that water doesn't get in it. Upon zipping the bag, I noticed a small bottle laying inside with some liquid which looked exactly like the makeup product that I recently purchased that went half missing. I got pretty stunned and I decided to check if it was mine. And so I applied some, and wow, it was exactly my makeup product that was basically half full. The same scent, shade, texture, everything. Just put in a different glass container. So now I know why my makeup item was feeling less full. I was initially taken aback and puzzled by this behavior. I could not fathom why she would resort to such sneaky tactics when she could have just asked me to borrow some and I would have helped her out. Mind you, she has asked me 1,000 times before, and not even once have I told her to not use my stuff. I actually am so welcoming towards her sharing my makeup as well as my clothes or skincare. We've always had a decent and fun relationship, or so I thought to some degree. It's not like I would have denied her request, but instead, she chose to do it behind my back, which has left me feeling a bit hurt and a bit betrayed. Now I find myself at a crossroads, unsure of how to handle this situation. My husband was surprised too, and said I should put my makeup product in other small containers and put them in her makeup bag so she understands. But I think that is too drastic, so I won't be doing that. He also suggested me to speak to my mother-in-law, who is a really good friend, and she is a very unbiased and wise woman. But honestly, I'm not sure what's the most mature way to go about doing this. I think my sister-in-law knows that I know because she's been having this quiet and guilty face since the morning. She also isn't even speaking to me. What should I do? There are quite a few options in my opinion of what you could do in this situation. First of all, you could talk to your sister-in-law if you really wanted to. If you are seriously that close with your sister-in-law, then maybe you could talk to her and be like, hey, are you stealing my stuff? And if she is, just ask her politely not to do it anymore. But if you really don't want her taking your stuff, then it's time to start locking away your makeup. And here's the thing, the product being taken could be anything. It could be food, it could be drinks, whatever. The fact of the matter is, someone else is stealing your products that you bought and is literally trying to get away with it. And that, in my opinion, is completely inappropriate. And you know what? Makeup is expensive. Some of that stuff costs a lot of money for very little product. So the fact that she's taking half of that is really uncalled for. That small vial of makeup could have easily at least cost like $40 or something like that. And to get half of that taken away all of the sudden overnight, that would probably make me mad as well if I was in their shoes. So honestly, if I was in your place, I would probably just start locking the makeup away. I think the old saying of out of sight, out of mind really does come to mind here. And maybe if you remove this from the equation, she can eventually get the hint that no, she can't steal from you anymore. And if she wants to use your makeup, she's gonna have to start asking like an adult for your stuff instead of sneaking around behind your back just to try and take it without you knowing, which in and of itself is incredibly selfish as well as incredibly childish. And unless she wants some kind of fallout or some kind of big blow up between the two of you, she seriously needs to stop her actions. Am I the jerk for leaving my family vacation after they forced me and my pregnant wife to sleep in a bunk bed instead of a regular bed? Here's what happened. So just to set the stage, me and my family went on vacation at a location about 8 hours away, and this was all for a wedding. I have two sisters, both are married, and one has a 1-year-old kid. My parents rented an Airbnb so my family could stay at the same place for 5 days. Check-in is at 4 p.m. Both my sisters and parents get there right on time, but me and my wife, who is 7.5 months pregnant, arrive at the Airbnb at 4:30 p.m. or so. We start to unload the car and ask where our room is. My mom responds by saying, "You guys get the bunk bed." And me, thinking that it was a joke, I say to them, "Oh, I hope I get the top bunk." Their response was, "No, actually, you get the bunk bed." That's when I realized they were 100% serious. While my two other sisters get a room for themselves and their husbands with queen-size beds, me and my wife get the literal kids' room with a bunk bed. My wife and I don't want to cause a scene, and we still want to be grateful for my parents paying for our accommodations. So we agreed to just give the bed a try for one night and see how it goes. Fast forward to bedtime, and around 12 o'clock we lay down on the bed for the first time, and it's as if you're sleeping on a wooden board. It's extremely uncomfortable, even for me, which means my wife was in a lot more pain due to her being pregnant. We toss and turn for a couple of hours, and finally we both agreed to just go sleep on the couch in the living room. It's around 2 o'clock in the morning. The couch is by no means comfortable, but in comparison to the bed, it was a lot better. We get a couple of hours of sleep when my dad wakes up and sees us on the couch and decides to go to the master bedroom to not disturb us. Again, we don't want to create a scene, so we just go back upstairs and try to get a little bit more sleep on the bunk bed before everybody wakes up. We end up getting around an hour of the worst sleep I've ever had, and just decide to wake up and go downstairs knowing we couldn't do that for a second night. So we booked a room at a hotel for a couple more nights just to get past the wedding, and then we were going going to leave for home. After explaining the whole situation to my family, instead of accepting it or helping us out, most of them started getting annoyed, saying that this was just another way for us to distance ourselves from the family. We just sternly say that we already made our decision and that they were just gonna have to accept it. Now, most of the family is irritated at us, saying that we ruined their trip. So honestly, are we the jerks for getting a hotel after we were forced to sleep on really uncomfortable beds? No, you are not the jerks. The fact that your family didn't reserve some kind of sleeping accommodations for your very pregnant wife and make sure that the two of you had something that was appropriate specifically for her is incredibly selfish in my opinion. It is so unfair that they didn't even think about her in the first place. Like, why on earth would you put a pregnant woman in a bunk bed that is very clearly uncomfortable? That is not only incredibly inconsiderate, but it's also very selfish. And to make matters worse, nobody volunteered to help out. Nobody volunteered their bed for the pregnant woman. Like, think about that for a second. These people did not care about this pregnant lady's comfort. She's literally 7.5 months pregnant, and now they're gonna make her sleep on a very uncomfortable bunk bed? Like, come on, that is so unfair. They should have been absolutely guaranteed one of the queen size beds. But instead, they all decided to take it and say, oh, they get to sleep in the bunk bed because they were late. Like, that is honestly so disrespectful. And then when you decide to leave and get more comfortable accommodations, they sit there and try and act like, wow, you ruined our trip. Why would you try to distance yourself from the family? Like, what are you talking about? You guys are literally insane for trying to make us sleep in bunk beds. So you know what? If I was in your situation, I would have done the exact same thing. If your family wanted you and your wife there that badly, they should have offered to trade beds with you. But you know what? They didn't do that. Instead, they would rather her be uncomfortable and sleep deprived just to try and make their trip a little bit more enjoyable, which honestly is insane to me and incredibly uncalled for. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, make sure to subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.